Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for another video. Recently, I was hanging out in Akihabara and had a little time to kill and wanted to play some arcade games. And it got me thinking, if I only had one afternoon left in Akihabara, what arcades would I go to? There are a lot of them, and many of them kind of run together. They're not all that different from the rest, but there are a few standouts. So today, let's take a look at what I think are the best arcades in Akihabara. The arcades that, if you only have an afternoon available, these are the ones I recommend checking out.
Japan! 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 Round one! Fight! Fight! Fight!
First, I have to give a shout out to Super Potato, which obviously is one of the more popular retro game shops in town, but if you do stop by to grab some games, don't forget to head up to the 5th floor and also play some games in their arcade. They don't have a ton, honestly, but what they do have is great. Plus, they also have an awesome little candy store on the same floor to get your sugar fix, or better yet, they even have an ice cream vending machine, and ice cream goes great with Splatterhouse. Super Potato, you're all right in my book. Next up, Gigo Building number 1, formerly Sega number 1. This place has the distinction of being the biggest of the Gigo arcades in Akiba, and it has something for pretty much everyone. If you want to play some crane games, no worries there, they've got you covered. But they also have a ton of rhythm games, a genre I personally have never been all that good at, but if that's your thing, they've got a lot to choose from. There's also plenty of TCG games, Gundam Extreme, an entire Gundam floor in fact, and they have a bunch of Nessica live cabinets which are loaded with lots of different games to choose from. Variety is the name of the game at Gigo number 1. Next up is Gigo Building number 3, and despite the fact that it's not quite as large as Gigo number 1, this is actually the one I prefer of the two. This arcade also has pretty much every type of game under the sun. There are a ton of crane games, of course, so knock yourself out, but there's also an entire floor of nothing but rhythm games, and they have pretty much everything. Whether it's DDR, Guitar Freaks, poppin' music, whatever your taste is, you're sure to find something. They also have plenty of fighting games, Gundam, and a variety of racing games too, but the absolute best games are on the 6th floor, which is referred to as Retro G. If you love retro games, especially retro Sega games, this is really the only floor you need. It's a thing of beauty. Last but certainly not least is what I think most people would agree is the best arcade in town, bar none, and that's Taito Hey. And man, is this place awesome. The second floor is loaded with a ridiculous amount of shoot-'em-ups, both old and new, as well as plenty of other retro games, beat-'em-ups, run-and-guns, platformers, they have it all. Then on the third floor, they have more fighting games than you can shake a Hadoken at. If you like Street Fighter, King of Fighters, Guilty Gear, Tekken, whatever it is, they've got it. Come with a pocket full of yen and kick some serious ass. So that's it. Those are, in my opinion, the best arcades in Akihabara. Whatever it is you want to play, you'll probably find it in at least one of these buildings. If you're visiting Tokyo and you want to spend an afternoon in Akiba, play some games, and have yourself a great time. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time on Mad Panic Gaming. Goodbye.
Mad Panic Gaming.
Awesome!
Hey everybody, Jim here and welcome to 16-Bit Anime, a series where I take a look at 16-bit games based on some of the most popular anime of the 90s, and we're kicking things off with what I and many people think is the best Dragon Ball Z game of the entire decade, and that is Hyper Dimension on the Super Famicom, which was released late into the console's lifespan in 1996. And it takes all of the good things from previous 16-bit DBZ games and drops some of their more annoying aspects, which makes sense as most of the staff that worked on this game had also worked on the very popular Super Butoden series. Also, this game now has an English patch, making it more accessible than it's ever been. Hyper Dimension features 10 playable characters, and it's a fairly traditional one-on-one fighter, but since it's DBZ, it features some very cool earth-shattering super moves, and it definitely plays a lot faster and feels more intuitive than previous DBZ fighters. Battles can take place both on the ground and in the air, and you can transition between both and even between stages in a single match, which is pretty cool. This game also removes the beam struggles from the Butoden series, which I think was a good choice, and honestly this is a lot closer to Street Fighter than any other game based on the series, albeit Street Fighter on steroids. There aren't a ton of gameplay modes, but the gameplay itself is solid enough that it's not such a big deal. The roster is also admittedly small, but all of the heavy hitters are here, and they each have a huge arsenal of special and super attacks. Something else unique to this game is that instead of just a health bar, you have a health number that you can actually slowly increase by powering up, and your health bar doesn't start depleting until the number hits 150. So matches can be quite drawn out, and they can get very competitive. Overall, a fun and well-made fighter with some outstanding graphics. The visuals had a darker and more detailed look to them than previous games did, and I really like it. The soundtrack is just okay, honestly. The music is decent, but definitely nothing memorable, but the sound effects and voice samples sound pretty damn good. The Super Butoden games were great for their time and can still be a good bit of quick fun today, but if you can only play one 16-bit DBZ game, definitely make it Hyper Dimension. It looks and plays better than all of the games that came before it, and honestly, a lot of the games that came after it too. Next, let's move away from DBZ and on to something a bit prettier, with Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon on the Sega Mega Drive. And what do you do with an anime series about a bunch of teenage girls battling the forces of evil with love and feminine charms? Why, you turn it into a good old-fashioned beat-em-up, of course. And I wish I could say this was one of the best, but Streets of Rage, it certainly is not. Honestly, that makes sense though, as I imagine the target audience for this game at the time might not have been up to the task of a brutally difficult beat-em-up, so this one is, by comparison, very easy. It's a nice leisurely playthrough, and it does feature all 5 of the Sailor Scouts as playable characters. And it's not just for show. They each have different standard and special attacks, as well as different projectiles that can be fired by simply charging the attack button for a couple of seconds. They also each have a super attack that sacrifices a little bit of health, as is typical of these kinds of games. Really though, this is a very straightforward and kind of slow-paced beat-em-up, and this is an instance where you would actually rather play the Super Famicom game, as this version is unfortunately single-player only, which is mind-boggling to me. By 1994, it would have been obvious that the cornerstone of any good beat-em-up is fun co-op gameplay, but unfortunately that's not an option here. On the other hand, this is a very good looking game, all things considered. The character sprites are very large, and the backgrounds are varied, colorful, and detailed. Plus, you do get lots of little Sailor Moon series details like stage intros similar to the transitions from the show, plenty of cutscenes and cameos from other characters such as Tuxedo Mask, and various recognizable villains. The sound design is just okay in my opinion, nothing to write home about, but we do at least get a pretty cool rendition of the Sailor Moon theme song. I was honestly kind of shocked when I realized that this game was an early project of Arc System Works. That's right, before they were kicking ass with Guilty Gear, they were getting pretty with the Sailor Scouts. Anyway, all things considered, this is far from being the worst 16-bit beat-em-up. It's actually pretty decent, all things considered, but the lack of multiplayer is what really holds it back. If you're a big Sailor Moon fan though, you'll definitely want to play this game at least once. If nothing else, it'll make you feel pretty. Next up, kind of hard to have an anime game discussion without bringing up Gundam, so here we have Kido Butoden G Gundam for the Super Famicom, and this is a game that's overshadowed by a much better Gundam fighting game, but we'll save that one for another episode. It's odd though, considering that this is the only Gundam series to my knowledge ever made where the plot centers around an international mech fighting tournament and features Gundams from all over the world that each have their own unique fighting style. So you'd think this would be perfect for a fighting game. And yeah, it's a perfect premise for a fighting game, but the execution leaves something to be desired. This controls like a fairly standard 2D fighting game, complete with the special move commands that you'd expect, and even some devastating super attacks. But in general, the controls are pretty stiff, and the gameplay is kind of clunky and slow. It's not a total mess, mind you, I've played much worse 16-bit fighting games, but it just has that feel, you know? Not every developer at the time could get the mechanics of a good fighting game right, and that's unfortunately the case here. It's still a playable game, but you'd much rather be playing Super Street Fighter 2, Killer Instinct, or that other Super Famicom Gundam fighter, Endless Duel. In terms of graphics and sound, that's another area where G Gundam is just okay. A bunch of mechs from the series are here, and they look the way they're supposed to, and the various stages also look fine. They're just lacking something in the way of detail, I guess. The music is similarly underwhelming. It's not awful, but it lacks a certain fullness, if that makes any sense. Again, I can't help but refer back to Endless Duel, which admittedly was released a couple of years after this game, but the graphics and sound are like night and day. I'm not saying I expected G Gundam to look and sound exactly like that, but it is a stark contrast. Honestly, I can really only recommend this game to big-time Gundam fans who have to play anything with the series name attached to it, but for everyone else, if you want to play a good Gundam fighting game on the Super Famicom, Endless Duel is really all you need. G Gundam is a passable effort, but it was made obsolete once Natsume stepped up to the plate. And now for something completely different. We've had two fighting games and a beat 'em up, so let's take a look at a it's hard to describe kind of game with Yu Yu Hakusho on the Super Famicom. This is the first of 4 games on the console based on one of my personal all-time favorite anime series, and it covers the start of the story all the way through the Dark Tournament, and the gameplay is something totally unique, at least to my knowledge. This is still technically a one-on-one fighting game, but instead of your traditional fighting gameplay, goes for sort of a weird strategy fighting gameplay style. It goes like this. Each round, both players choose an action for their character to perform, and see how things play out. Kind of like an advanced game of rock, paper, scissors. You can opt for a physical attack, which won't use up any spirit energy, but won't deal as much damage and is easier to dodge. Or you can launch an energy attack and potentially deal some big damage, but with less spirit energy over time, you become more vulnerable. You can, of course, charge your spirit energy back up, but again, that makes you a sitting duck. It's definitely an odd gameplay style and one I don't recall seeing in any other games, but once you get the hang of it, this game becomes pretty fun. There's a story mode to play through that hits most of the major battles from the show, and there's a versus mode as well. The roster features lots of characters from the anime, and they all have their signature attacks, and something especially cool about this game is the visuals. Yu Yu Hakusho goes for a very cinematic look, which again is quite unique. And whenever the characters are performing their special attacks, we're treated to some kick-ass Mode 7 graphics. Very cool stuff, and a great looking game all around. The sound design is decent too, though I was particularly impressed by the quality of the voice samples, and there are a lot of them. Every time a character launches a special attack in keeping with the anime tradition, they scream the name of the attack and the voices come through surprisingly clear. This honestly isn't going to be a game for everyone. I'm sure a lot of people would much prefer to play just a good old-fashioned 2D fighter, in which case, there are a few that are based on Yu Yu Hakusho. But if you're looking for something a little out of the ordinary that actually does a pretty good job of recreating a fight scene from the show, this is a game that I can definitely recommend. For the last game we're looking at today, we've got something at least a little more obscure. When it comes to DBZ, Sailor Moon, Gundam, and Yu Yu Hakusho, you've got a lot of options for your 16-bit fix, but when it comes to Magical Taruruto-kun, you really only have a few, and just one game on the Sega Mega Drive, and that's this game right here, which was published by Sega in 1992, and it was actually developed by Game Freak, the same Game Freak behind the Pokemon series. So just like with Sailor Moon, we get to see an interesting early work from a developer that went on to do much bigger and better things. This was yet another Japan exclusive release, which makes sense as, to the best of my knowledge, Magical Taruruto-kun is a series that itself has never really seen any success outside of Japan. This particular game is, as is the case with most games based on the series, now that I think of it, is a fairly straightforward platformer, and to date, it's also the best game I've ever played based on this series. You get one main attack in this game, which is hitting things with Taruruto-kun's magic wand, and when you hit objects with it, you can pick them up, which also gives them eyes for some strange reason, and you can then launch them as a projectile. You also have a double jump that turns into a glide if you hold the jump button, and this is eventually an indispensable ability as you'll need to clear some big gaps and slide under some obstacles at the end of your glide. This is a fun enough game with responsive controls, quality work by Game Freak, and the visuals are excellent. This is a very bright and colorful game filled with large character sprites and lots of cool little effects here and there. And the soundtrack is super upbeat and chipper to match the visuals. The one major drawback to this game, though, is that it is very easy. Not much challenge to it at all, really, whether it be the stages themselves or the boss battles. This is a very leisurely and stress-free playthrough. Again, I'm guessing the target audience was a bit younger, but still a slight bump up in challenge would have been appreciated. Overall, though, not a bad game at all, and well worth playing if you're a fan of platformers. Just be prepared to finish this one in about 45 minutes or so. A short game and not a particularly tough one, but enjoyable nonetheless.
That kind of gaming. Let's go.
Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for another video on Mad Panic Gaming. Today, while I was out on my travels running some errands, I popped into a nearby book-off for a quick little game rummage and was surprised to find they actually had some pretty damn cool retro games. So I was able to squeeze in a quick little retro hunt today, which is always awesome. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, because that is what's coming up next. All right. Getting started in this book off. It was actually a book off Super Bazaar, which are usually loaded with games. We got a PS2 Slim. We got a Neo Geo Mini for only 6,300 yen, which is honestly kind of surprising. I usually see those going for more. 6,300 yen is only a little over 40 bucks these days, so that's cool. A retro game HDMI converter. I have no idea how well or poorly that would work. PS3 controllers, a whole mess of old DS consoles, and even a few of the Game Boy Advance SPs, which are always very cool. I myself was big on the DS back in the day, hiding out in the bathroom at work playing Mario Kart. I'm not too ashamed to say. Famicom cartridge that I don't know what the hell it is, and even some Castlevania for you, so there you go. A little Densha Go controller, again, not something I'd expect to find in this book off. Mother! Classic game. Lane Sweet Home back there, which is very cool. Zelda Assault Suit Vulcan, which I think is called Cybernator in North America, at least. So that's pretty cool. I've been to this book off a few times before, and they usually don't have like a ton of retro stuff. So today I was like really shocked, kind of pleasantly surprised. Hey, look at that handsome fella. We got some PS5s here. They're selling those for what, like 46,000 yen. So that's not too bad. It's like 300 bucks for a used PS5. Anyway, here we go. Retro game, in case you didn't know. That's kind of for retro game. They actually had a ton. They had loose cars. They had PS2. More than I was expecting to find. I pretty much just stuck with the box stuff today, though. Save us some time, so we don't have to be here all day. I did say it's a quickie, didn't I? Perpetual Blue on the Dreamcast, 1100. This is a game I've never played, but the packaging is pretty sweet. There are a lot of these games on the Dreamcast, though, that I like. The Japanese Dreamcast library is pretty big. It's much bigger than North America. Lots of stuff. I don't even know what it is. 20% off at 3,600 for this copy of Valkyrie. I think it's Valkyrie no Boken. Valkyrie's Adventure. So that's pretty cool. Most people know Valkyrie no Densetsu on the PC Engine. Maybe some of you are not aware. There's one on the Famicom. We got Xevious for 1,800. Xevious is an old favorite of mine. Usually if I'm in an old retro arcade, I'll sit down and play a game of Xevious. This, pretty cool find for 5,900. So that's in the neighborhood of 40 bucks. Complete, well, not a complete copy. It's missing the manual, I think. But Ninja Ryukenden 2, aka Ninja Gaiden 2. Some cool box art there. I myself am more partial to the third game. But 2 is pretty cool. It introduced like some weather effects and things. Still pretty tough game, but a lot of fun. We got some N64 boxed, starting with Yoshi's Story, 900 yen. And that ain't bad. With exchange rate, I think that's about 5 bucks actually. And well, there you go, Jim Butterfingers. You break it, you bought it. That's why we like to have jump cuts every now and again. 6,800 though for this copy of GoldenEye, and I will say this is like, the box was in fantastic condition. It's a complete copy. 6,800. That's in the neighborhood like 40 something bucks. That's actually not such a bad deal on that, even though I'm not as big of a GoldenEye fan as a lot of other people are. I didn't really grow up with N64, so I'm not like the fan of some of the titles on it that other people are. Here we have Estpolis 2, some RPG on the Super Famicom for 5,900. So if anybody knows anything about that one, you can tell me. Like, I don't have full mastery knowledge of the Super Famicom library, unfortunately. Fighter's History, though, for 4,800, and again, that's in pretty good condition. It's complete as well. I like Fighter's History. In particular, I've played quite a lot of Fighter's History Dynamite, which I had on the Neo Geo CD. Not a bad series of, well, 2D fighters. I say series, but it's really only the one. 7,700 on King of the Monsters 2. So that's like 50 bucks for a complete copy of King of the Monsters 2. which is pretty damn cool because I occasionally come across the first game. Very rarely do I come across the second. But I was not coming in here anticipating spending like $50 a game though. 5,900 for Sailor Moon S, the Sailor Moon fighting game, which is apparently quite popular. Or I say quite, I don't really know, but popular enough in fighting game circles. We got Magical Taruru-Tokun Magical Adventure, which is 200 yen off of an 1,800 yen price tag. There are only a handful of Magical Taruru-Tokun games, but I think they're all platformers, and they're pretty good, though the one on the Mega Drive is my personal favorite so far. We have one of these Momotaro games, Super DX. I guess you're a little train conductor in there. Again, Momotaro, another one that I don't know a terribly lot about. Gundam F91, killer box art, but this is another one of those Gundam, more like strategy games, which I've never gotten into. I like myself a good old Gundam fighting game, or like a third-person shooting game, something like that. That was Breath of Fire there, and we've got Garo Densetsu Special for 1,800, and the only thing that was really kind of wrong with it, the box, I don't know if it shows up so well on the camera, but the box was like a little dirty looking. So even though 1,800 is a decent deal on that, that's like, I don't know, $12. I did end up passing on that one today. 200 yen off from 5,700 for Tokimeki Memorial, Konami's sort of like flagship dating sim that they had at the time, although I only really like Puzzle Dama. 2,700 on Super Mario Bros. Collection, aka All Stars, which is great. I preferred All Stars back in the day over Mario World. Ultraman, 3,200 with 200 yen off. And even still, I passed because the Ultraman games typically suck. So that's another one that I passed on. No Ultraman for me today. Though a buddy of mine, he actually provides a voice for one of the Ultramen, I guess you could say. Final Fantasy V, 1,100 yen. It was 89.80 when somebody bought it brand new back in the day. That ain't chump change. But now it's like $7 if you want to pick that up. Unfortunately, I don't get a lot of requests for RPGs. I could be cleaning up if I sold nothing but RPGs. 20,000 yen for Knights of the Round. Now, Knights of the Round, amazing game. The arcade version is obviously better, but 20,000 yen, that's about $150 or so. And that ain't cheap. 3,200 on Super Bomberman 4. All of the Super Bomberman games are awesome. I think there are 5 of them. They're all great. They all play more or less the same. They're Bomberman games, but they each throw in like little different gimmicks and things. Different worlds and bosses and stuff. 4,100 for the original Gambare Goemon, which is actually a little bit more than I think I normally see it going for. So book off, what are you doing to me? And a copy of Mother 2, 4,500. It was in like immaculate condition, and it was complete. 4,500. That's about $30. And Mother 2, that's actually a pretty decent deal on it, because that's one that, to find it in that condition these days, it's going up in price a bit. We got Hoshino Kirby 64. Fantastic game. We got a copy of Quicks on the Game Boy, 1,500. I myself am a fan of Quicks, just good old school gameplay. Obviously the arcade version is the one you're going to want to play. And we got hamsters. We officially have hamsters, ladies and gentlemen. Oddly enough, though, some of the kids I teach, they're crazy about these like hamster games. Mario Tennis, I'm sorry, hamster videos, where people like set up obstacle courses for hamsters, and then hamsters just run around through them. 3,600 for Rockman Exe, whatever it's called in Japanese. Maybe Battle Network or whatever. I never got into those particular Mega Man games, so you'll have to excuse me. That's another series where I know almost nothing about it. 900 on Beautiful Joe 2, that ain't bad. We got some Shadow the Hedgehog, which I've still never played. I kind of Not the biggest Sonic fan from that era. 400 for some Rogue Squadron. That's awesome. And only 480 yen for SSX3. 480 yen for almost any game these days is fine, because that's like $3 American. Can't go wrong with that. We got Soccer something or other. I have no idea. Konohana True Report. Again, another later released Dreamcast game. By Success, though, so that's interesting. I like games by Success. Was that Canaria? Whatever the hell this is, no idea. Evolution? I know Evolution. Kind of like a little action RPG. And 200 off at 1,100 yen. This copy of Capcom vs. SNK. So 900 yen on this. That's pretty cheap. That's like, I don't know, $6. And you got yourself some Capcom vs. SNK. There's some damage to the disc, I suppose, but still, that's a damn fine deal. Don't come across those too often. 900 on Virtua Fighter 3 TB, which stands for Tournament Battle. 1800 on Sakura Wars 4. They had a bunch of copies of Sakura Wars 4. So I guess somebody came in here and just dumped. They're like, hey, I got all these copies of Sakura Wars 4. You want them? Sure, why not? 1800 on Shenmue 2. Classic game, although I played it like many people on the Xbox back in the day and really enjoyed it. I've still, to this day, I've never played Shenmue 3. The original Sakura Wars ported to the Dreamcast. 200 off of 1500, so that's 1300 yen, about $9. 900 on Part 3, there you go. Got some NFL 2K, some Power Smash, those are fun as well, and Tetris 4D at 480 yen. That's a good deal. And 1100 on this nifty copy of Biohazard Code Veronica. I like that. I like that game a lot. I just hate Steve. I hate irritating characters like that. The game is otherwise awesome, though. We have a handful of Saturn games here. Most of it stuff I'm not too particularly interested in. Cheap, mind you, 700 yen, 900 yen, 1100. Lunar, the Silver Star story for 1600 yen, though. That's awesome, and I think like you can even improve the look of the cutscenes with if you have a particular RAM card or something to that effect. Some Shining Force, and then here a solid deal on this, 720 yen for a copy of Vampire Hunter. That's like $5 for Vampire Hunter, so I set that to the side. That's a definite for me. We're still looking. We've got Gun Griffin at 900. Gun Griffin's okay, although I like the one on PS2 a bit more. Gun Griffin Blaze. So there you go. And we have one lone Mega Drive game, Puyo Puyo 2, for 1500 yen, but there's a couple hundred yen off because the case itself, or at least the insert in the case, was just a wee bit ratty. So there you go. I found some cool stuff just there on that shelf. And as you can see, lots of loose games to go through here, and there's a bunch of PS2 and everything. Like I said, I wanted this to be a quickie, so we're going to jump right to my finds of the day. Starting with, yes, of course, 720 on a Vampire Hunter. That's a good deal, so I scooped that up. Lickety split. And 200 off, so 900 yen on this copy of Capcom vs. SNK. Again, that's a very good deal on that, so I grabbed that. That's like a $5-6 game. 720, this copy of Dragon Quest III came in a very cool, like, cassette case. And it had the manual with it as well, which I thought was nice. So at 720, that's, again, that's like less than $5. So that was a grab. 900 on Fate Unlimited Codes I found on the PS2. Excellent fighting game. Published by Capcom, developed by Type Moon. Again, that's very cheap on that. It's a great fighter if you've never played it. And shocking, 270 yen on Guilty Gear X Accent Core. This is like $2, maybe even a little under $2 for that. So that was just an absolute steal. So those are my finds of the day. I actually picked up a big bag full of things. I picked about 20 games. I think I spent about $50 American. So not a bad little trip for something that was kind of spur of the moment. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this little retro game hunt. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Goodbye. Hey everybody, welcome back for another Mad Panic game review filled to the brim with fluorescent bullets and lots of explosions because it must be another shoot 'em up. And today we are taking a look at the ever so awesome Triggerheart Excelica on the Nintendo Switch. If this game looks familiar, that's because since its initial release in 2006 as an arcade game, it has been released on numerous other platforms, including the Sega Dreamcast, the PS2, and the Xbox 360. This port was handled by Cosmo Macha, a small developer here in Tokyo that mostly works on modern ports of games from this era, and it was released at the tail end of 2023. If you've already played this game on any other platform, then you don't really need to sit through the rest of this review, as not much has changed over the years. But if you've never played Triggerheart before, then sit back and let me tell you why it's pretty damn cool. For starters, you have two playable characters to choose from, the title character Excelica and her compatriot Cruel Tear, and they each have a different primary shot, with Excelica being equipped with a wider spread shot and Cruel Tear having a more narrow, but also slightly more powerful shot. But other than that, they both function basically the same. The controls are super simple and easy to get the hang of. You've got one button for your primary fire, one to launch your super bombs, and you have your anchor ability, which is the main gimmick of Triggerheart. Your anchor allows you to latch onto enemies and use them as projectiles. You essentially swing them around like a hammer throw and then release the button to launch them in any direction. These enemies can also act as something of a shield while you've got a hold of them, as they cancel out any bullets that they come into contact with. The bigger the enemy is, the longer it takes to gain control of them. But larger enemies can obviously absorb more bullets and cause more damage when they are released. For enemies that cannot be captured, i.e. bosses and mini-bosses, your anchor instead acts as a lock-on ability, allowing you to maintain a steady stream of bullets on your target even as you maneuver around. And maneuver you will, because Triggerheart can get a little bit crazy with the bullets, eventually going full-on bullet hell. It's a lot of fun, obviously, but also pretty damn tough. In this port, you get a total of 4 different gameplay modes to choose from, and they include a practice mode that not only helps you get acclimated to the game, but also lets you play through any stage you want. You also get an arrange mode that is basically a score attack that gives you only one continue, the original arcade mode, and a story mode, which I found to be the most pointless, honestly, as well it's Triggerheart Excelica. I don't really need cutscenes interrupting the flow of gameplay to fill me in on the story, which is honestly pretty nonsensical anyways. Just let me shoot some stuff. Overall, though, this is a rather challenging and fun shooter. I've played it in various iterations, including the original arcade and Dreamcast releases, and it holds up as an enjoyable game that is still worth at least the $25 I paid for it. What doesn't hold up, though, is the visuals. This was honestly never a very visually impressive game. In fact, even in 2006, when we had some outstanding looking shooters out there from the likes of Cave, Capcom, and Rising, Triggerheart always just looked kind of bland, and that hasn't changed. The environments and enemies are all very generic looking, and I've even heard some people say that Triggerheart gives them a sort of Flash game vibe. While I don't think it looks quite that bad, there's no denying that this game doesn't look very good running next to some of the other shooters that I've covered on this channel. On the other hand, the soundtrack remains solid. It's filled with energetic and upbeat music that lends itself very well to a game like this. So it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the visual and sound design, but luckily, looks aren't everything because Triggerheart has it where it counts. in the gameplay. While it wasn't the best shooter of its era, and it still isn't to be quite honest, this is an enjoyable game that will give you quite a challenge, especially if you decide to turn up the difficulty in the options menu. Again, as I said before, there are plenty of ways to play this game these days. You might even want to pick it up on Steam. But if you prefer playing shooters on your Switch, then Triggerhard Excelica is definitely worth picking up because it's awesome.
Emergency. The target is approaching.
Yeah, Mad Panic Gaming!
Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for another video. Today, I am in the neighborhood of Shimbashi here in Tokyo, directly next to Shimbashi Station on a very bright, beautiful day. So what better time than now to go inside and play some video games. So directly behind me is the new Shimbashi building. It's literally directly next to Shimbashi Station. And from my understanding, inside there's not one, but two retro game arcades, which is right up my alley. That's right, today it's double your arcades, double your fun on Mad Panda Gaming. So let's get inside the new Shimbashi building and see what they got. Let's go. It's red. Not going yet. It's red.
Japan, 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 Japan. Round one. Fight, fight, fight.
Okay, so now we're on the second floor of the new Shimbashi building, and directly behind me is Game in Rido. It says part 1. I don't know that there's a part 2. Just at first glance, though, it looks pretty cool. They got a lot of candy cabs and other stuff in there. I do have to say, though, I was not expecting a lot of massage parlors on this floor as well. I don't know what the hell that's about, but we kind of had to go through like a little bit of a gauntlet of massage ladies, sort of like deflecting them before we could get to the arcade. So just keep that in mind if you come to Game in Rido. You might have to, turn down a few massages or, accept a massage. I don't know. That's up to you. That's your business. Anyway, Game in Rido. Let's check it out. Let's go play some games. Here we go. So Game in Rido, first impressions, this is like the definition of a retro arcade. Even like the lighting and everything has like a really old feel to it. There are even like old paintings and stuff on the wall, which is kind of odd. You'd expect like video game posters or something like that, but instead it's like paintings of mountains and trees and stuff. They have a variety of games in here. They're mixed. Some of them are 100 yen, some of them are 50 yen, but they're all retro. And looks like there's a lot of fun stuff to play up here, so let's do exactly that. Check out this kick-ass gameplay footage. Alright, so game in Rito. It's pretty cool. They have some decent games here, a couple of fighting games, some shoot 'em ups, puzzle games, things like that. One thing to note though is that there are like a lot of mahjong and like other kind of like tile games in here, which I have like absolutely no familiarity with at all. I would say this place is about like 50% mahjong. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to come here to play some games, maybe you're in the area, you're in Shimbashi, you want to check out this little arcade, just bear that in mind. There's a lot of mahjong and a lot of like older fellows sitting around playing mahjong games where you strip the clothes off of ladies after you win a hand of mahjong. Anyway, this is pretty cool, but I do believe there's one more stop for us today.
But wait! There's more!
Any normal person would want to beat the machine.
And you come back
Oh, sure.
again,
Oh, sure.
again.
Yeah.
All right, so now we find ourselves in the basement of the new Shimbashi building. Oddly enough, the basement, not nearly as shady as the second floor was. Usually you'd expect the basement to be kind of trashy. Everything here is kind of shuttered though, which is weird, but this place is open up. This is called Amusement Space Diana. Not a retro arcade, in fact. It looks like there's a lot more modern stuff in here. A lot of like Gundam and maybe some Tekken, Virtua Fighter, whatever the case may be. And a much younger crowd down here too. So yeah, let's check out Amusement Diana and see what kind of games they got. Let's do it. All right, so that's Amusement Space Diana, as you just saw. Not a retro arcade at all. It's mostly Gundam Extreme, which is a pretty popular game, with a little bit of Tekken thrown into the mix, a couple of other various things. It feels like the guys playing here, it's kind of like a usual crowd kind of thing, a lot of locals. It was funny, there are even signs saying, don't bash your fists on the cabinets and don't shout or things like that. So I guess it gets pretty heated in there sometimes. Also, this is a place where smoking is allowed. There are ashtrays with the cabinets. So if you can't tolerate cigarette smoke at all, you're probably going to want to skip this one. But if you want to come sit down and like play some Gundam Extreme, some Tekken, maybe get the feel of like a lively local arcade here in Tokyo, Diana is pretty cool. Anyway, that's it for today. We took a look at 2 arcades, 1 retro, 1 not so much. Lots of cigarette smoke, lots of massage women, and lots of shutters and creepy stuff. I'm ready to get the hell out of here. I'm not really selling you on this place, am I? Thanks for watching, everybody. This is Mad Panic Gaming. I'm Jim, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye. Hello everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for another edition of More Games. And today, oh boy, what a great episode. As you can see here, I got a nice big stack of boxed Famicom games to show off. Recently I've been out filming some more game hunts. Trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. 1, get some videos made, and 2, pick up games for people who are paying for games. And so it's been pretty productive this past month, so I got some videos, some game hunting videos, brand new stuff on the way. But in the meantime, we get to do some fun pickups, talk about some games today. down in the comments, you can let me know any new pickups you might have come across recently in your game hunting travels. I'd certainly like to know, but first, off the top of the stack, we're going to get started with definitely the most expensive and elusive game of this episode. This is something I picked up considering the current exchange rate. I'd say I picked it up for a fraction of what you would see it for, like on eBay or something. But still not a cheap game by any stretch of the imagination. It is Nekketsu Street Basket. And I think the subtitle is Gambare Dunk Heroes. This game is awesome. I think this is the last of the Famicom Kunio-kun games to be released. And the premise is that Kunio wins an all-expenses-paid trip to the United States on a game show. So what do you do when you go on a trip to the United States? Obviously, you go there and you play some 2-on-2 basketball. So this is a really fun 8-bit basketball game, but it's Kunio-kun, it's Nekketsu. So it's not going to be your typical basketball game. It's more of a combat basketball game, and they're like gimmicks for each court. The courts are set in all different areas of the U.S., and they're very cliched. So you got Vegas, and there's like big casinos and stuff in the background. There's a court in Texas where you're like playing basketball on like a cattle ranch or something. I don't know how much basketball gets played on a cattle ranch, but there it is. But it's a lot of fun. So obviously you can attack the other players. You can pick up weapons and items and throw them. You can actually pick up like step ladders and things, like it's a Harlem Globetrotters game. And you can like jump off ladders and do big dunks. And there are actually 3 goals on either side that are each worth more points. So if you can get like all 3 goals in like one shot, you get these huge points. It's like an old school game of MTV Rock and Jock, if anybody remembers that. You can actually steal the goal from the opponent's side. You can like take their goal off and then run over and attach it to one of your backboards. And then you have an additional goal, so that's even like more points you can score. So there's a lot of wackiness going on in this game. Perhaps the craziest basketball game you'll ever play. Right in there with NBA Jam. So it's a lot of fun. Great visuals if you like the Kunio-kun games. If you like River City Ransom and stuff. You like that Technos Japan character designs. You would like the visuals in this game. Nice and colorful. And the soundtrack is really good too. Like I said, I think this is the last of the Kunio-kun games to be released on the Famicom. I could be wrong about that. Kakuto Densetsu might have come out after this one. Either way, this is a late release for the Famicom. It looks good, it sounds good, and the gameplay is really fun. The only drawback is this is a very less common Famicom game. So it can get kind of expensive. It can run you, a box copy like this online could run you, I don't know, $300, $400. Like I said, I picked this up for like less than half that, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, still, even at half of what it's going for online, it's still not a cheap game by any stretch, but it's a lot of fun. So there it is, Nekketsu Street Basket. Someone is going to be very happy with that.
Challenge, exciting, power, and love.
Next up, a Capcom classic. Many people argue if this is the best in the series, but I got Rockman 3. And yeah, the argument generally goes, what's better, Mega Man 2, Mega Man 3? I've said it in the past, my personal favorite of the original NES games is actually Mega Man 5. But they're all amazing games, obviously. Mega Man 3, Rockman 3, I should say. Great game. You get Rush, which is awesome. You get the slide attack as well. And you have a really great assortment of Robot Masters. They're not all great. Like, who is it? The Hardman. Hardman's kind of lame. Snake Man, I've never really thought was all that cool. But like Shadow Man, awesome. Gemini Man, I think, is in here. Gemini Man is pretty cool. And I like the Magnet Man as well. So they're all pretty cool. Visual is pretty nice. When was this one released? 1990 on Rockman 3. So this is right around the time 8-bit is starting to kind of be on its, its final good run, and 16-bit is coming in. But a lot of fun, this game. This and 2 were the ones that were in my house when I was a kid. When I say a kid, like a little kid, I think I was like 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old when this game was released. My older brother was a huge Mega Man fan, so mostly I would just watch him play either 2 or 3. Later, during the 16-bit generation, I got really into the Mega Man X series. And to this day, the original Mega Man X is still my absolute favorite Mega Man game ever. But this was a favorite of my brother's, and it was either this or 2 that was my first ever experience playing a Mega Man game. I wouldn't have been very good at it. By the time I actually picked up a controller, I was probably like 5 years old. And I would have been dying immediately. Basically, I would have been playing whenever my brother got bored of it. And I had a chance to play, but as soon as he was ready to play again, of course, I get kicked off the console. But Rockman 3, Mega Man 3, great game, lots of fun, good graphics, lots of memorable music in this one as well. And the Dr. Wily stages are pretty gnarly. Some good boss battles in this one, and again, you get Rush, you get the slide attack, you get some pretty cool little cutscenes and things. So this was great. Kind of a, yeah, people argue 2 or 3, I say 5. Whatever, it's your personal preference. You can tell me down in the comments what's your favorite of the 8-bit Mega Man games. But I think it's kind of hard to argue that they're not all, you know, totally kick-ass games. But anyway, what am I saying? Rockman 3, Dr. Wily no Saigo. The end of Dr. Wily, which that was, it's kind of like Friday the 13th, right? When they were like Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, and then like 5 sequels later, it's like the final Friday, and then there are more sequels after that. The end of Dr. Wily in Part 3, I really don't think so. Anyway, still an awesome game, Rockman 3, and yeah, boxed, everything. There's some, you know, a little bit of damage because the original price sticker was on there. Someone tried taking it off. I mean, this, you know, 1990, so this is a 34-year-old game. I'd say it looks okay for its age, kind of like me. But yeah, Rockman 3, Dr. Wily no Saigo, awesome game.
今度は宇宙で決戦だ。ロックマン。ロボット犬ラッシュを従え、さらにパワーアップ。ファミコンソフトロックマン3ドクター・ワイリーの最後、近日発売予定。カプコン。
Next up, another Capcom classic from 1990, as a matter of fact. Box is a little ratty, but that's okay. That can be forgiven. Japanese, Wanpaku Daku Yume Boken, sorry. Wanpaku Daku Yume Boken, or as we know it, DuckTales. Yeah, this game is awesome. Very easy game. But still very fun, especially when compared to like the Mega Man games and stuff. This was such a much easier title. But then again, it's DuckTales. It was like a kid's, you know, Saturday morning cartoon. So, you know, someone like my age at the time, like 5, 6-year-old kids, probably would have been really interested in playing this one. So very simple premise, just a handful of stages to go through. I think half a dozen altogether. You're Scrooge, you bounce on bad guys with your cane, you break blocks with it, you find little treasures and things to build up your score. And that's it. There's a boss at the end of each stage, and it's a fairly leisurely, easy playthrough. You can finish it in what, like 30 minutes maybe? I mean, speedrunners will obviously finish it in like 5 minutes. But if you're just like playing a normal playthrough, you go through it at a normal pace, whatever, you can finish this game in like half an hour. Same with DuckTales 2. I actually think I like DuckTales 2 a little bit more. Even though it's missing, you know, the soundtrack for this one, especially the Moon theme. Like, everybody kind of refers to the Moon theme as being one of the best 8-bit tracks, like, ever. And I can agree with that. It's just a really catchy, awesome tune. So despite missing that music and kind of like the impact of just, oh, that first DuckTales game, it's so awesome. I actually think I prefer the second DuckTales game overall. But they're both really great. So this one, again, this is becoming less common. Like, if you find this game loose, it's probably like, I don't know, a $20, $30 game. You find it complete like this, even if the box is a little tattered up, you're looking at like $100 for it, which is not cheap. But again, when games like this, they're getting older, it's getting harder and harder to find them boxed, regardless of the condition of the box. So if you're a collector, you know, you just kind of bite the bullet. You want to get something like this and like take good care of it, because it's a part of history now, and it's like a little piece of art. This box. It's got blue and pink polka dots, and how do you argue with blue and pink polka dots? I don't know, what the hell. Anyway, great game. Really love it a lot. DuckTales, aka Wanpaku Ducku Yume Boken. I guess like the famous duck adventure or something like that. Really great game. DuckTales. Can't get enough of it, especially that beautiful music.
みんなで仲良くわんぱくダック夢冒険
Next up, 1989 on this one. One of my favorites, either NES or Famicom games. It doesn't matter. One of my favorite games generally by Konami. This is Akumajo Densetsu, aka Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, I do believe. Even though I have not played the North American version like since I was like a kid. Like the first time I played any Castlevania games was again around that same time when I was a little kid, either watching my brother or my older cousins play it, and just being like enamored with it, and just knowing that like you're supposed to get to Dracula at the end. So just like sitting there watching my cousins try and fail over and over again, and just like really wanting to see Dracula for whatever reason. There's kind of like mystery to it. This evil figure hovering over the game, you know, watching over everything you do, this final boss you'll get to. Kind of like Ganon back in the day. Final bosses were really built up back in the day, weren't they? It was like this mysterious character. They talk about it, you know he's there, but you have to go through hell and high water to get to him. And then when you finally get to him, it's a really epic, it's a special experience. Anyway, Akumajo Densetsu, more or less the same game as the NES game, except for a couple of things. One is that the Famicom game employs, and I forget the exact name of it, but it's an additional sound chip in the cartridge itself that gives the game like the sound quality a nice boost. So the Famicom version actually sounds better than the NES version, so that's very nice. And also this lacks the censorship, which wasn't very much. I think it's some like religious iconography, maybe a little bit of blood, I'm not sure. Anyway, I love this game. You're playing as, in the Japanese version, it's Ralph, actually, Ralph Belmont, or Trevor Belmont in the NES version, and you can pick up your companions, and that's really cool. You can pick up Alucard. Alucard's awesome. Sypha is usually the one that I go with, but very cool because, I mean, Castlevania 2 was kind of like an adventure you could explore and everything else. This was kind of like the best of both worlds, where it's just a straightforward side-scrolling action platformer, but there are branching paths you can take. It'll, you know, change your experience a little bit during each playthrough. Get a different character. The experience is different if you're playing as Sypha, if you're playing as Alucard or Grant. They have different powers and things, so that's a lot of fun, but still a very difficult game. Hyper challenging, a lot of great boss battles. Dracula in this one is a tough bastard, there's no doubt about that. But all around though, this game is just great. The visuals for the time are absolutely excellent. The soundtrack is fantastic. Again, one of the best 8-bit soundtracks ever, made all the better if you're playing the Famicom version, and just a lot of fun. This was like a big step up, like Castlevania 2 being the black sheep. If you just went straight from the original Castlevania to Castlevania 3, or just from Akumajo Dracula to Akumajo Densetsu, it's this huge jump up in quality. It plays better, it looks better, it sounds better. Just all around an amazing sequel. One of the best sequels ever, if you ask me. So it's really great. Again, another one that's getting like a little more expensive these days. It's not as uncommon as like Neketsu Dunk Heroes or maybe even DuckTales or something. But still becoming less and less common. So loose carts, again, probably in the neighborhood of 20 or 30 bucks. Complete copies running you probably around 100 bucks. And this one, the one I got here, it's not too bad. There's a little bit of damage to the box here and there, but the cover art still looks nice. The box itself is in pretty good shape, so I'm happy with that. And it's complete, it's got the manual, it's got everything with it. So that is awesome. And the game itself is awesome. Someone's going to be really happy with that. So yeah, Akumajo Densetsu, amazing game. Again, happy to find this on my travels and to play it a little bit before I send it out to anybody. Because I got to test it out, you know, got to play myself some. That's kind of like the joy of this. Like, even if I'm going to send a game out, I mean, really, the responsibility falls on me to test it out. So I get to play some really fun games in the process of making these videos and sending people's games out. But yeah, Akumajo Densetsu, one of the all-time greats.
あのドラキュラから3年、ゴシックホラーアクション「悪魔女王伝説」ファミコンカセットで好評発売中。
Next up, another one of the absolute all-time greats. A 1988 release in Japan, I think, and 89 in the US. But this is Ninja Ryu Kenden, aka Ninja Gaiden, obviously. And I don't think there are any like significant regional differences. I was playing through this earlier, and it still feels just like good old-fashioned Ninja Gaiden to me. This, you know, aside from obviously being in Japanese. I know with the third game, there were significant alterations to the third game when it was ported to the US to make it a more difficult game. So that's one that people really complain about, that Ninja Gaiden 3 has limited continues and it's just brutally difficult. If you get the Japanese version, Ninja Ryu Kenden 3, it actually has unlimited continues, and I think you even take less damage from enemies. But the original game, no real difference between the regions. Don't really need to say very much about this game because anyone who's ever touched an NES has played this game at some point. Incredibly fun. One of the best 8-bit action platformers, just period. It's an amazing game, but it is brutally difficult. It gets easier. Like, I remember being a kid and thinking this was just like an impossible game, like barely getting past stage 2 ever. Whereas as an adult, really it's only the final stage that gives me any trouble. Just because eventually, like, you learn the patterns and you learn that getting the spin move, like the spin wheel, the flippy sword attack, that's like your best friend. Pretty much any boss in the game, you can just take them out in a couple of hits with that thing. So once you like learn the patterns where you can hang on to that and just sort of like annihilate the bosses right out of the gate, this game gets a lot easier, even though, yeah, again, that 6th stage still kicks my ass, you know, quite often. Other than that, though, I can pretty much breeze through this game now, which is great, you know, kind of a feeling of accomplishment. If I've done anything in my 30-some-odd years on Earth, I got pretty good at Ninja Gaiden. So, yeah, that's great. I guess I can die a happy man knowing that I don't suck too bad at Ninja Gaiden anymore. Chisel that on my tombstone. He didn't do much with his life, but he got pretty good at Ninja Gaiden, so, you know, give the guy a pass. Anyway, great game. Got it boxed and complete. This is another one that's like 100, 150 bucks if you find it complete. Online, you know, it's like, you know, a few $100 or whatever. So I can't complain. I'm getting good deals out here compared to what people have to deal with online. Still not a cheap game though, but it is a damn awesome game. Ninja Ryu Kenden, Ninja Gaiden, whatever the case may be. What are your memories with this one? Because I just remember getting my ass kicked by it, but just thinking it was so badass that I just had to like keep playing and playing and playing. Until eventually I got kind of acceptable at it. I went from terrible to slightly above mediocre. So there we go, Ninja Ryu Kenden.
Out of the darkness, the bright spirit of the Ryuken reborn. Ninja Ryu Kenden from Tecmo. Just when you had given up all hope, a ninja saves you from the evil Jackie O. More realistic than any other TV game, you're right in the action, fighting to the death. Coming soon from Tecmo, Ninja Ryu Kenden, incredible game software for Famicom.
Next up, from 1986, I do believe. So the oldest game in this stack of games, another Capcom classic, and another brutally difficult one. This is Makaimura, aka Ghosts and Goblins. And yeah, another game that is brutally difficult, or at least it was until I spent a significant amount of time with it. Now it is merely regularly difficult. Like, again, like a lot of these games, it's just time, because none of them are terribly long. Like Ninja Gaiden, for example, once you know how to, I mean, you can beat that game in like, you know, what, 20 minutes? 20 to 30 minutes? It's just, it felt like such a bigger, longer game as a kid because it was so damn difficult to get through. You beat it never. It's like an infinite amount of time because you're never going to get through it. Kind of the same thing with Ghosts and Goblins, where it felt like a really long, brutal, intense game because it was so difficult, and it felt like impossible to clear it. Once you get pretty good at it, you kind of understand the enemy patterns, and you get the appropriate weapons. You get accustomed to the platforming, because it's not the best ever. That's the thing about this game. It's a classic. A lot of people love it. A lot of people appreciate it as just like a really difficult old game. It's technically, it's not really like a great game. Like I personally would much rather be playing a Mega Man game or a Castlevania or Ninja Gaiden or something like that. This game plays pretty stiff. You're really outmatched, and it is like pretty cheap and unfair. You really have to figure out how to cheap the game. But once you figure that out, it's not that especially difficult, I guess. It goes from being like an impossible game to being merely a challenging game. But it takes a long time to figure it out. Watching YouTube playthroughs helps a lot, though. Like when you can watch someone who's much better at it than you, and then see what they're doing, and then you go back and give it a shot and try those same things. You're not going to replicate their gameplay perfectly, especially at first. You're going to be like struggling with like, how did he do that? How did he do that? But over time, these games become much more enjoyable once you actually know what you're doing. And it doesn't feel like such a brutal impossibility. It's not quite as frustrating at that point. But anyway, still, classic game. Many people would consider it to be one of the all-time greats. And it's pretty rad. I won't say it's one of the all-time greats, but it's a game I do still like quite a lot. And just having this box copy is excellent. The artwork on the front is actually pretty cute. It's not like the greatest artwork I've ever seen. Some of these early Capcom games on the Famicom, actually, the artwork wasn't great. It got better over time. This is another one where when you find it loose, it's not, you know, really terribly expensive, maybe like 15 bucks or something. You find a box copy like this, maybe in the range of like 80 bucks, between 80 and 100. And again, this game is like pretty old. It's older than I am, I think. So to find it complete in any condition is nothing short of miraculous. But there you go, Makaimura. Old-timey, difficult, but very fun game. Charming, I guess would be the word. Charming graphics and sound. Capcom games got a lot better in the years following this, but this was like kind of a good jumping off point. Like this and like 1942, stuff like that. The early Capcom games, Sun, they have a certain charm to them, but again, they don't hold a candle to like stuff that came out later. But still pretty cool, and you can't argue with that kind of crude, but also kind of cute box art there. But yeah, Makaimura, Ghosts and Goblins, pretty damn cool. Next up, another 1989 release, and a game that quickly became actually like one of my favorite movie license games ever, by HAL of all companies. This is new Ghostbusters 2. And if I'm not mistaken, this was also released in the UK on the NES, but never had a North American port, which is like mind-boggling. I know there's a Ghostbusters 2 NES game, but it's not really very good. This game is awesome. Premise is pretty simple. You pick 2 Ghostbusters, including Lewis. They included Louis Tully in here as a playable character, so that's cool. So you get all 4 of the Ghostbusters, and you get Louis Tully, the honorary 5th Ghostbuster. But it's really fun. It's a top-down little action game. So with one Ghostbuster, you use the Proton Pack, And when you have a ghost trapped with your proton pack, the other Ghostbuster, you can hit the other button to deploy the trap, and then you capture the ghost. So that's it. That's all you do. You walk around from room to room, you catch ghosts, and then you fight bosses. The way you fight bosses is you put the proton pack on them, and you have to hold it on them for a long time until they turn red, and then you can suck them up with the trap. So the bosses are a little bit tougher than just your normal enemies, and there are like a ton of different kinds of enemies. You got the Slimers and other things. Ghosts that just sort of like hover around, but then you have some that like run. They have different like attack patterns. Some of them can shoot stuff at you. They're like little slime creatures. Bosses are cool. Like you have like the Scoleri brothers. The first stage is in the courthouse, and then you fight the Scoleri brothers at the end of the first stage. So that's really cool. There's like the ghost train, and there's like all the severed heads floating around. Eventually, obviously, you're going to fight Vigo. That's a given. So it's cool. It loosely follows like the plot of the movie. The stages represent different sections of the movie. I think there are only 5 stages in this game, though. It is a short game, finishing about 30 minutes or so. But it's really fun. Like, it's just, the gameplay is very intuitive. You can play through it really quickly and beat it, and then maybe just play it again because it is that much fun. I love the visuals. They're like very cute little chibi versions of all the characters, and they're all recognizable as who they are. Like if you play as Ray, has those like little like night vision goggles on, so it's easy to tell it's Ray. Egon, he has his big glasses on. If you're playing as Peter, he has Bill Murray's hairline. That's like the easiest way to tell who he is. So that's really cool, but yeah, overall I just really like this game. I got a lot. The visuals are, you know, kind of cute and charming, and the soundtrack is pretty damn good too. It even includes like 8-bit chiptune versions of some of the licensed music from the movies. So like one of the Bobby Brown tracks, I think it's called We're Back, that's in here, and then Glenn Frey, he's got a song on the Ghostbusters 2 soundtrack. I think it's called Flip City or something, but that's also here. Flip City plays when there's like the big montage of like the ghosts and, you know, terrorizing the city. So that's cool. So the soundtrack is pretty good in here. The OST and the graphics are nice, and the gameplay is really fun. And if you ask me, of all the 8-bit Ghostbusters games, this is definitely the best one. And it's one of the best Ghostbusters games ever made, period. Like, I really liked the game that was on the Xbox 360. It was ported to other stuff later, I think. I had played it on the 360, but I really liked that game. And Ghostbusters on the Genesis is pretty cool too. But this is just like something special. I had never gotten to play this as a kid. When I finally got my hands on it, the first time I played this game was like, I don't know, 10 years ago. But I was immediately like, wow, this is really cool. I like this a lot. So great game. Another one that's becoming more expensive though, especially if you find it boxed like this. You're looking at like 150 to 200 bucks if I'm picking it up in the store. Probably more than that online. Probably looking at 300 to 400 bucks, which is, wow, that's pretty rough. But man, what a great game. And this box is still in pretty good condition. So there you go. Ghostbusters 2. Happy to have found that. I occasionally will find a loose card of this game, but this is a much more uncommon game on the Famicom. The cover art is, you know, pretty much just it's like the VHS of Ghostbusters 2. Anyway, new Ghostbusters 2. If you've never played this one, if you played like the other 8-bit Ghostbusters games and they're really shitty and that really kind of like soured you on them, play this one. This game is awesome.
Who are you going to call?
Ghostbusters!
Okay, finally, last but not least, speaking of movie license games, in my opinion, one of the best movie license games, not just on the Famicom or NES, but just like ever. This is one of my favorite NES and Famicom games, period. It is Batman. And another game I don't really need to say too much about. I feel like if you're into NES or Famicom games, you should have played Batman by now. If you haven't, it's just a really solid action platformer. You can punch, you've got batarangs and missiles and that cool like spread shot thing. The wall jumping is really cool. It's like a very intuitive game. Some people say it's kind of like a Ninja Gaiden-esque game. Sort of. I mean, a lot of the 8-bit action platformers, they kind of run together. You only had 2 buttons to work with, so you gotta, you know, kind of figure it out. But yeah, just a great game. Really great graphics. I love the cool, color schemes. There's lots of purples and pinks and greens and blues. So that's really cool. The soundtrack is excellent. Sunsoft always had a really great track record of putting good music in their games. But this game in particular just has like a phenomenal soundtrack. Absolutely love it. And of course the gameplay is a lot of fun. It's just really difficult. This is another one kind of like a Ninja Gaiden or a Castlevania, where it has that reputation for, wow, it's really fun. The controls are great. Everything about it is fine. The gameplay is excellent. It's just the stage layouts themselves, the enemies, some of the boss battles, they're pretty damn tough. Now this is another game, just like with any old game, with enough time and practice, you get better at it. It's not quite as tough as it was when you were like 6 years old, obviously, but still no walk in the park. But this game is amazing. It is and always will be one of my favorite 8-bit games and one of my favorite movie license games. Like, that's saying a lot, because since then, like, a lot of really cool movie license games were released on the SNES, 32-bit, 6th gen and onward. Not always great, but there have been some pretty excellent movie license games over the years, including arcade games, mind you. Some of my favorite arcade games are like RoboCop 2 or Aliens. Those are awesome. This, to me, stands as one of the best movie license games ever. They basically just took the property and they said, what can we do with this? Batman fights bad guys, he punches them, he uses, weapons like batarangs and stuff. Let's just make a balls to the wall, side-scrolling action platformer and be done with it, and give it awesome graphics and a great soundtrack and one hell of a final boss. Holy crap. But what a great game. And I love the box here. It's just, Batman. Again, it looks like it could be the cover of a VHS tape. But it's another one of those games, one of the rare games on the Famicom that came in a clamshell case. So basically, this thing's going to last forever. Again, this game was released in, 1990? So it's 34 years old, but just look at it. Look at it. Clamshells. They'll survive the nuclear apocalypse. It'll be cockroaches and clamshell cases, and that'll be it. But yeah, Batman on the Famicom, NES, whatever the case may be. One of the best movie license games, and one of the best 8-bit games ever made.
映画の興奮が今ファミコンで蘇る。悪の支配者ジョーカーの手からゴッサムシティを救え。ファミコン版バットマン、世界に先駆け君のもとへ。
So that's it. There you go. That's a nice big stack of Famicom games I picked up recently. A lot of jelly in these donuts. I'm going to be sending those out to, I don't know, whoever the hell is going to get them. I don't know at this point. But great games, all of them. And I would say for the age, I'm happy with the condition of them. So there you go. Let me know down in the comments, what are your thoughts on any of these games I featured in this video. And hey, again, tell me some recent pickups of yours. If you're a retro game collector, I'd love to know what you're picking up. What are the people playing out there? I pick up games, I sell games, so it benefits me to know what people are looking for these days. Mostly, I deal with like a lot of Famicom, Super Famicom, Mega Drive, Sega Saturn, stuff like that. But I'm not really so much the collector anymore. I'm more of the facilitator these days. So yeah, down in the comments, what are you picking up? What are you playing? Hell, what's your favorite movie license game of all time? Do you agree with me on Batman? Do you think it's something else? Again, I mentioned RoboCop 2 in the arcade, Aliens in the arcade, two of my all-time favorites. Anyway, I feel like this video's going on long enough. You get the point. Famicom games, pickups, whoopity-doo. really selling this one to you. So thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate it, and I will see you for the next edition of more games, whenever that may be. So until then, take care, and I'll see you later. Goodbye. Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome to 16-Bit Superheroes, the series where I take a nostalgic look back at 16-bit games featuring some of the most popular comic book and animated superheroes of the 90s. And today we're kicking things off with the wall crawler himself in Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage on the SNES. This is a game that I rented about 1,000,000 times as a kid, and I don't think I ever beat it at the time, but it's fun enough that I was always willing to give it another try. It's also one of only 2 games on the SNES to feature a red cartridge, which obviously made it stick out on a rental shelf. The plot is pretty simple. Carnage breaks free from Ravencroft Penitentiary and rounds up some supervillains to wreak havoc on New York, so it's up to Spider-Man, Venom, and a handful of other superheroes to bring down the insane symbiote and his henchmen. The gameplay is that of a fairly straightforward beat-em-up, and this is honestly one of the better games in the genre on the SNES. Way better than games like Rival Turf and Alien vs. Predator anyway. You get to play as both Spider-Man and Venom, and they both have some pretty cool moves at their disposal. But a huge flaw in this game is that it's single player only. It would be so much more fun if you could play as Spidey and Venom at the same time, but that would have to wait for a later game. Also, Maximum Carnage can be an especially brutal game, which is why I never finished it as a kid. You have limited continues, and the enemy AI can be exceedingly cheap. You can eventually call in other superheroes for assist attacks, but for the most part, it's just you against a legion of bad guys and bad gals, including a whole mess of boss fights with the likes of Shriek, Spider-Man's evil doppelganger, the Demo Goblin, and of course Carnage himself. The secret to beating this game, as it turns out, is finding all of these secret hidden bonus rooms that contain additional health power-ups and some extra lives, which are an absolute must. Without those, I don't think I'd ever be able to get through this game. Those shortcomings aside though, this is a fun and well-made beat-em-up overall, and a good-looking one as well, especially the really cool comic panel cutscenes which look great. And this is another LJN published game that features some outstanding music, courtesy of the band Green Jelly, who composed the entire soundtrack. So while Maximum Carnage isn't the best 16-bit beat-em-up, it's far from being the worst, and it's probably the best Spider-Man game of this generation of consoles. Next up, we have the original X-Men for the Sega Genesis, and this is a game that I both loved and hated as a kid. On the one hand, it's an action platformer featuring my favorite 90s superheroes, with Gambit and Wolverine being my 2 all-time favorite X-Men. But on the other hand, it's a brutally difficult game that always made me give up within an hour or so. The plot is simple enough. By using a computer virus, Magneto is able to take control of the Danger Room and use it against the X-Men, putting them in all kinds of dangerous and deadly situations, including fights against some of their most powerful adversaries. So you'll find yourself in some recognizable locations from the comics, including the Savage Land and the Shi'ar Empire, and ultimately Asteroid M, where you'll take on Magneto himself. You have 4 X-Men to choose from, plus a handful of others that can be called in for support, and you can swap between any of the 4 playable characters whenever you want, and each of them has unique powers and abilities that make them more useful in certain situations. It all sounds good on paper, but when you're actually playing X-Men, it's clear the execution could have been a lot better. The controls are a bit stiff, the enemies are a real nuisance, and there are pitfalls and traps everywhere. It really makes me appreciate the simplicity of the X-Men arcade game. Sure, it's repetitive, but it's a hell of a lot of fun. X-Men can work as an action platformer, as we'd later find out, but the formula wasn't yet perfected here. Plus, your mutant powers are limited by a power meter, so you have to use them kind of sparingly, which is something that honestly nobody wants. If I'm playing an X-Men game, I want to be able to just go nuts with eye lasers and adamantium claws, you know? Also, this game features the infamous section where you actually had to hit the reset button on your Sega Genesis to continue playing, but it was very easy to actually reset the game and lose all your progress, which would be infuriating. As tough as this game is though, it's actually really short. It never felt short as a kid because I had to restart it so many times, but once you actually know what you're doing, you can finish this game in under 45 minutes, even faster if you're actually good at it. Oddly enough, it gets more fun as you get better, but then it's over way too soon. That aside, this is a decent looking game for 1993, but the sound design is pretty bad, especially when compared to later X-Men games like Clone Wars and Mutant Apocalypse. Anyway, X-Men isn't a perfect game by any stretch, but it's decent, way better than any of the 8-bit games anyway. Just try not to pull your hair out playing it. Next up, since we took a look at a Spider-Man game and an X-Men game, why not both in Spider-Man and the X-Men in Arcade's Revenge? And this is another game that I both loved and hated as a kid, and despite how many times I got a game over, which was many, many times, I would always be willing to rent this one again. Almost like I forgot how much it kicked my ass the last time. I'd see that cool cover art sitting on the shelf and I'd be like, okay, let's give this one another go. Just like the two games we just looked at, Arcade's Revenge is a ball-crushingly difficult game, and I never beat it as a kid. As an adult, it's admittedly not quite as difficult as I remember it being, but it's still no walk in the park. It is cool to have both Spider-Man and the X-Men in the same game, but the execution is very flawed. The story begins with Arcade kidnapping a bunch of the X-Men and imprisoning them in Murder World. So once you complete the first stage as Spider-Man, you have 5 different characters to choose from, each with their own unique stages to play through. The real problem here is how weak the game makes each character feel, and it doesn't utilize their powers all that well. Wolverine, for example, is the worst character in the game since he has no range, and it would be nice if he at least had his healing ability to compensate. Or when you're playing as Gambit, you can actually run out of cards, in which case, you're screwed. The worst, though, is definitely Storm. They took an extremely powerful character who can fly and control the weather, and gave her these infuriating water levels to deal with. When you do eventually get to play as Storm in a platforming stage, she's perhaps the best character in the game, but it's short-lived. It's honestly just not how you want a game like this to play, though. You expect the X-Men and Spider-Man to be absolute badasses, but here they're kind of wimpy, honestly. The graphics also kind of suck. I mean, the stages look okay, but the characters are tiny and lack detail. They almost look like they were taken from an 8-bit game, actually. And when villains like the Shocker and Apocalypse show up, they also look quite lame. On the other hand, the soundtrack is awesome, so at least there's that. But overall, this game just feels like a missed opportunity. It's not a terrible game, but it is below average and way too difficult. Marvel games definitely got a lot better once Capcom took up the mantle, but for what it's worth, Arcade Revenge is worth playing at least once. Next up, moving away from Marvel and over to DC, we have Superman for the Sega Genesis. And this is another game that is okay, but feels like a big missed opportunity. It was developed by Sunsoft, who made a ton of great games in the 80s and 90s, and it features one of the most powerful superheroes ever, with a virtually limitless array of superpowers. How could it possibly not be great? Well, one way to ruin it is to drastically underpower Superman. Obviously, a game where you're basically unbeatable would get boring pretty quickly, but here, not only are you beatable, you are very beatable. Almost as though you're not even playing as Superman, but a less powerful guy dressed as Superman. This is an action platformer for the most part, and you are limited to a basic punch and a few superpowers that, just like the X-Men, are limited in use and need to be recharged with power-ups, or they recharge on their own over time. You have a super punch, heat vision, and a spinning attack that you really only ever use to break through floors. You can also damage enemies overhead with kind of a Shoryuken style high jump, but for the most part you'll just be running around punching everything in sight. There are also some flying segments where you use your heat vision exclusively, but I would have loved to have been able to fly and blast bad guys with lasers all throughout the game. So this ends up being yet another brutally difficult game that doesn't make the best use of an iconic superhero. It's beatable, especially with cheat codes, which really come in handy, but it could have been a lot better. This is one game that's actually more fun if you try to speed through it, as stopping to fight every enemy you encounter will likely get you killed. There's also not really much of a plot to this game, unfortunately. It's just a bunch of random bad guys like Brainiac and Metallo causing trouble in Metropolis, and it's up to the Man of Steel to take them down. So not a lot really to get invested in, and definitely lacking the cool cutscenes of Maximum Carnage. On the other hand, this being a Sunsoft game, the visuals are pretty decent and the soundtrack is actually really good. It features a mix of both high energy and some more slow-paced groovy tracks that would feel right at home in a Streets of Rage game. Really good stuff. Honestly, this isn't the worst game ever made. It's playable and it can be fun once you figure out the best way to approach each stage. But as a Superman game, it's pretty weak. Most Superman games honestly suck major ass though, so I'd say we got off light with this one. Finally, to end on a bit of a high note, we've got a bit more of an obscure game, and that's Batman on the PC Engine. Once again developed by Sunsoft. It's based on the '89 movie, and it's radically different from its NES and Genesis counterparts. Those were both awesome action platformers, but for this one, Sunsoft decided to go with sort of a maze action game, and for whatever reason only published it in Japan. So no TurboGrafx version for this one, which is mind-boggling considering how big of a blockbuster this movie was. So, a Batman game where you don't punch or kick anyone, but instead wander around mazes attacking bad guys with batarangs while collecting the various items needed to clear each stage within a limited time. Hitting an enemy with your batarang stuns them, and you can knock them out of the way by simply walking into them. Walk into them when they're not stunned though, and you'll lose a life. That's right, the mighty Batman can be taken down in a single hit. Anyway, the enemies that you knock out will eventually return, so you're never totally safe. And as you progress, you'll contend with a variety of enemies that either move much faster or have ranged attacks, and other obstacles will also stand in your way. While all this is going on, you have to recover various items such as tainted cosmetics, or the Joker's parade balloons, eventually culminating with a one-on-one fight with the Joker himself. This is a really odd approach for a Batman game, I must admit, but as it turns out, this game is really fun. I like a good old-fashioned maze game, and you can do a lot worse than this one. Admittedly, it doesn't make Batman seem very powerful, but that can be forgiven when the game actually plays well. The graphics are really simple though, which might turn some people off, but all of the various locations and enemies from the movie are present, and there are even some cutscenes included to move the plot along. Plus, this is a Sunsoft Batman game, so you know it's got an amazing soundtrack. The music here is seriously awesome, and even includes a track from the Batman NES game, which sounds especially cool coming through the PC Engine sound chip. Honestly, this is definitely not the first game that comes to mind when you think '89 Batman. The NES game is one of the best action platformers of its time, and the Genesis game is no slouch either. But this game is surprisingly fun and very well made. If you've never tried it before, I'd highly recommend it because PC Engine Batman is awesome. Hey everybody, Jim here, welcome back to Mad Panic Gaming, where today I hope you're ready for plenty of runnin' and or gunnin', because we're about to take a look at some absolutely awesome arcade run-and guns, some of which had console ports, and some that never saw a release outside the hallowed halls of an arcade. Such is the case with our first game, Konami's Aliens from 1989. Which is not only one of my favorite run-and guns of all time, but also one of my favorite movie license games ever, and it's so fitting that Konami developed it considering how much inspiration they took from the Alien series when crafting Contra. It might be more apt to describe this one as a walk and gun though, as you're not exactly sprinting to the finish line, but that's probably because your base weapon is the massive smart gun from the movie, a piece of equipment that only the likes of Drake and Vasquez were badass enough to handle. Now in the hands of one Ellen Ripley as she mows down legions of xenomorphs. So yeah, it's not exactly faithful to the movie, but screw it, the smart gun kicks ass, so I'm not complaining. Also, before I go any further, yes, this game is a fun single-player experience with Ripley going in solo, but if you've got a second player handy, the game gets even better when Corporal Hicks joins the party. In addition to your smart gun, various weapon power-ups are available, including a 3-way shot, a missile launcher, and my personal favorite, the flamethrower, which rips through xenomorphs like a hot knife through butter. Something else of note, instead of just having the same enemies thrown at you over and over, which would get a bit boring after a while, this game invented some entirely new creatures to spice things up. You'll be confronted with flying xenomorphs, which is the stuff of nightmares, an armored xenomorph that rolls around like the armadillo from Mega Man X, and even a pair of electric-powered xenomorphs that give you one hell of a shock. Ultimately, though, you will come face to face with the Queen Alien, in which case, you've got a power loader handy to toss that bitch out into space. The core gameplay of Aliens is extremely simple, as you might expect. Just annihilate everything in sight with whatever weapon you can get your hands on, and the action never lets up. This game is 100% balls to the wall brutality, and I don't even want to imagine how many quarters I would have had to go through to clear it. Also, I have to say that the visuals are absolutely fantastic. This is an amazing looking game for 1989, and the soundtrack perfectly sets the stage for the mayhem that you'll experience blasting your way through this legendary run and gun. If you've never played Aliens before, you are missing out big time, because Konami definitely poured everything they had into this one. Play this game immediately, because it's awesome.
That's it, man. It's game over, man. It's game over.
Next up, something at least a little more obscure. This is Judan Arashi Gandara from 1995, developed by Banpresto, and in case you were wondering, the title translates to Bullet Storm Gandara, which is very apt because, yeah, you will be assailed by so many bullets you'd be forgiven for thinking some sort of natural disaster has occurred. But fear not, because you yourself are also a bullet and bomb-spewing instrument of death and destruction. For a game I had honestly never even heard of until perusing for games to feature in this series, I thoroughly enjoyed Gandara and can certainly recommend it to run-and-gun fans. You start out with a fairly standard machine gun, but you can increase your firepower with power-ups, and there are a ton of different weapons to pick up, each with its own unique super attack, and in addition to that, you can also pick up a missile launcher that fires homing missiles all over the screen, and this is such a lifesaver in a game like this where enemies are constantly coming at you from all directions. You even get to take a page out of Chuck Norris's playbook with a sick spinning back kick for when enemies try to get a little too familiar with you. So when you're fully powered up, dual-wielding machine guns and a rocket launcher, you are an absolute killing machine, but you do power down with each life you lose, and if you have to continue, you will be sent back to a checkpoint, making Gandara at least a bit more of a challenge to get through. Also, in the midst of all that death and carnage, be sure to rescue those kids. This is a vertically scrolling run and gun, as you can plainly see, and it'll definitely remind you of similar games like Mercs, Shock Troopers, and I even got a hint of Ninja Commando, another personal favorite of mine. And in addition to the run and gun gameplay, you'll get to hop onto your motorcycle to show what a true badass you are with some auto-scrolling action. And you can even occupy the occasional vehicle for some additional mayhem. As is the case with any game like this, Gandara is very fun as a single-player experience, but also offers you two-player co-op. I, however, was flying solo for this playthrough, and I still had a great time. It's non-stop action and excitement with this one, and it's topped off with some pretty decent graphics overall. Nothing mind-blowing, but we get some big character sprites, detailed stages, and some huge bosses to take on. The soundtrack is honestly the weakest aspect of the game, and it's mostly drowned out by the sound effects anyway, but aside from that, this is one run and gun that gets my personal seal of approval for kick-assery and badassery. It's Gundara, and it's pretty damn cool.
Okay, here we go.
Are you ready? Totally badass.
Next up, we have another Konami classic and another one of my all-time favorite run and guns, and that's 1991's Sunset Riders. And this is an instance where I played the console port of a game long before ever actually getting the chance to play the arcade game. Sunset Riders was one of my favorite SNES games as a kid, especially if I had a friend to play with, and certainly a damn fine port, but when I finally got around to playing the original arcade game, well, it honestly doesn't get much better than this, at least as far as I'm concerned. If you've never played Sunset Riders in one form or another, first of all, shame on you, but second of all, play it immediately if you enjoy run and guns, because it can best be described as kind of like a Contra game, but with cowboys. And if that doesn't sell you on it, I don't know what will. You've got 4 characters to choose from, 2 that fire classic 6 shooters, and 2 that carry repeater rifles, which are my preference, as whenever I'm given the choice, I always go for a nice spread shot. You can pick up a couple of different power-ups for some dual wielding action, as well as auto fire, and aside from that, point bonuses in the form of bags and piles of gold that can be collected throughout each stage. In fact, your score is depicted as a dollar amount because, after all, you are playing as some Old West bounty hunters, and at the start of each stage you're shown a wanted poster with that stage's boss on it and how much he's worth. That's something else that goes a long way to giving Sunset Riders a lot of personality and charm. The colorful cast of Old West stereotypes that you'll be hunting down for the duration of the game, including some unforgettable quotes.
Marry me with my money.
Sprinkled in between the run and gun stages are auto-scrolling stages on horseback, very fun indeed, and a nice diversion from the other stages, and you even get some cool bonus stages in the form of a shooting gallery. I feel like a broken record, but this is a game that is obviously more fun with co-op, and actually came in 2 varieties, a 2-player cabinet, or better yet, a 4-player cabinet for some especially chaotic Wild West hijinks. Regardless of how many players you have though, this game is insanely fun, and it must be said that the graphics and sound design are outstanding. This is such a colorful and vibrant game with a wild cast of characters, and a lot of care and detail put into each stage, and the soundtrack is just as excellent. It's like Konami took the theme from Bury My Shell at Wounded Knee and made a different version of it for every stage in the game. Truly awesome. So with graphics, sound, and gameplay that are about as good as anything could have been in 1991, Sunset Riders is one of the best run and guns ever.
You got me.
Next up, since you really can't have a discussion about run and guns without mentioning at least one Metal Slug game, let's go back to where the series began with the original Metal Slug from 1996. And it's odd that even though this is the game that started it all, It's probably the one game in the main series that I've played the least, and in many ways, it feels like more of a prototype for what Metal Slug games would later evolve into, especially if you go back to this game after first playing some of the sequels. This is a series that over the years has jumped the shark in more ways than I can count, and despite how intense and crazy the first game can be, it's weird to say that it's without a doubt the most tame that the series would ever be. There's still plenty of shooting action, big explosions, and legions of enemies to annihilate, all with some absolutely outstanding graphics and sound design. But in this case, you have 2 playable characters to choose from instead of 4. Eri and Fio hadn't yet been introduced. Some of the weapons that would later be introduced, such as the enemy chaser and the laser shot, are absent here, and the only vehicle you can commandeer is the original titular Metal Slug tank, which, to be fair, is one absolutely badass piece of equipment, but I did still kind of miss the Harrier jets and the camel with machine guns strapped to it. Also, is it just me, or was someone at Nazca a big fan of New Dominion Tank Police? Anyway, something else that's a lot more standard in this game is the plot and setting. You won't find any space aliens, mummies, maniacal robots, or zombies here, just lots and lots of merely human enemy soldiers being led by the sinister General Morden as he attempts to take over the world. You'll be fighting your way through enemy bases, treacherous mountain paths, and war-torn cities on your mission to restore peace, order, and kick some serious ass. Despite lacking a lot of the more outrageous set pieces and gimmicks from later Metal Slug games, this first installment is still an extremely fun and enjoyable game. It's non-stop action from start to finish, the controls are spot on, the challenge actually feels pretty fair despite how much the game throws at you in terms of enemy firepower, and again, the entire game looks amazing, with lots of detail in each section of every stage, and of course, the trademark tongue-in-cheek humor that the series is known for is here in full swing. So if you've played and loved some of the sequels but never bothered to go back and try out the original, definitely don't overlook this one, because despite what it might be missing, it's got it where it counts. Metal Slug is and always will be awesome. Last but certainly not least for this video, we have another game that I only played for the first time very recently, and it immediately became one of my favorite run and guns, and that is the ever so badass Gun Force 2, aka Geostorm, which was released in 1994 and developed by Irem. And if you were thinking that it looks an awful lot like Metal Slug, you'd be correct, as most of the staff that worked on it would later form Nazca Corporation and begin work on the Metal Slug series. Oddly enough though, Gun Force 2 goes way further than the original Metal Slug in terms of the sheer insanity of the gameplay. Hell, it outshines even some of the Metal Slug sequels in that department. For example, instead of having just a pistol as your base weapon, you start out with not one, but 2 heavy machine guns that can fire in multiple directions, and from there you can get equipped with flamethrowers, lasers, and more vehicles than you can shake a grenade at. I was seriously impressed by just how much firepower this game gives you right out of the gate. It's almost as though Irem looked at what was available in games like Contra and Shock Troopers and said, we can do better than that. You'll get to play around in various kinds of tanks, jump on stationary guns for some added firepower, and even commandeer a couple of flying craft for some aerial combat, which is especially cool. Also, you'll still be saving POWs in this game, same as in Metal Slug, but instead of emaciated bearded guys, you'll be saving babes, which, depending on your preference, is something of an upgrade. One thing I will say though, Gun Force 2 is certainly more difficult than Metal Slug, that's for sure. And it's not as though Metal Slug is an easy game or anything, but this game just throws everything in the kitchen sink at you immediately and only gives you 2 lives per credit. There are tons of enemies coming at you at all times, bullets flying everywhere, and the bosses pack a ton of firepower and take forever to kill, making this kind of like the Danmaku version of a run and gun. It's brutally difficult, but it's so fun and so kick-ass at the same time that you don't really mind, especially if you're playing a ROM instead of dumping endless quarters into a machine. Bottom line though, I don't think this is a game that was ever meant for a 1cc. Aside from the epic gameplay, as you can see, this is a great looking game, and much like In the Hunt, is a game that had the Metal Slug look before Metal Slug was a thing. Great graphics and a pretty damn good rockin' soundtrack coupled with some explosive sound effects just make this game that much better. But at its core, this is one seriously awesome run and gun. One of the best, in fact. And if you've never given Gun Force 2 a try, drop everything, run to your nearest arcade and or ROM sites and tell them, give me Gun Force 2 or go to hell. It's that damn good.
That looks entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Not Panic Gaming. Let's go.
Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for another game hunt here in Japan, and today I was on my way to the neighborhood of Yanokuchi to go to a big heart off they have there, but I realized only a couple of stations away in the neighborhood of Inada Zutsumi, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but there's a book off here that looked pretty good on Google Maps, so I thought I might take a little pit stop, a little lunch break, and then get a mini game hunt in before I head to the main course, which is today's Heart Off. But I'll save that for another video. Today, though, we're going to dig around in a book off here in Inada Zutsumi and hopefully come away with some retro gaming gold. So stick around, because that's what's coming up next. All right, book off in Inada Zutsumi. Here we go. Starting off, they had some of these clone consoles for $32.28. I guess it's got a bunch of games inside it, and then it also plays Famicom games. They had 2 different ones, although I would just skip those altogether if you're going to get some kind of clone console thing. And they had a campaign going on. This was the last day of it. I guess they wanted to buy your Famicom and Super Famicom carts, but we got Captain Tsubasa 2, I believe, at 3,200 yen. Which is actually a little bit high on that. Usually the Captain Tsubasa games are pretty common, so they're usually a little bit cheaper. This pretty cool family boxing, it says, aka Ring King. I think 300 off of 1,600, so that's pretty cheap on that. And we also have Family Stadium 90. There you go, a bunch of these Namco games. You can always spot them because they have a nice clamshell case. 900 on this one. It's Go, I believe, which I do not even know the rules of Go. So, yeah, passed on that one. Here, though, very cool, Super Xevious. And 400 yen off, so 1,400 yen. Because I'm guessing some damage or the manual missing. But there you go. I myself, a bit of a Xevious fan. If it's at an arcade, I'll sit down and play a game there. This missing inserts. So it's only like 700 yen, which is pretty cheap on that. But Crayon Shin-chan, those are some fun games. Easy little games. Got lots of mini games and stuff in it. Very cute. I think meant more for, little kids. One of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms games, I guess. Again, no interest there. And then Itadaki Street. which is a board game type thing. I played one where it was like Dragon Quest themed. 1500 on a complete Yoshi's Island, but there's damage to this, that, and the other. I liked this book off. They didn't have a ton of stuff in it, but they had meticulous notes like written on all of the stickers. If there's like any kind of damage or anything missing, it was all on there. Super Bomberman 4, 2700, and it's complete. But there's some damage to the box itself, and presumably the other stuff inside. That's to be expected. I mean, these games are pretty old now, over 30 years old, pretty much all of them. 2300 though on Samurai Spirits, and that ain't bad. So I set that aside, started building a little stack of games for myself, all of the stuff I was going to take out of here with me. When you got one hand free to look for games and then one hand holding the camera, 700 on this Super Nazo Poyo, missing the manual I believe though. Yeah, usually after I film these, I just either I make a stack of games or I make a mental notes of like all the stuff I want, and I just try to remember it. But once I put the camera away, that's when I go and I grab the basket and I start filling it up. Today though, I thought, you know what? Let's not trust Jim's failing memory these days. Let's actually set some stuff aside. Battle Dodgeball, pretty cool. Like 900 yen. You got all the little chibi characters, Gundam and what have you. And Super Donkey Kong 2, aka DK Country 2. A little faded. And again, I think missing the manual. Kind of hard to read the handwriting there. Usually they have that little yellow sticker on it. And Super Mario RPG 2900. And I guess that's not so bad these days. It's a really clean looking box and everything. No notes about anything being missing or damaged, so that's okay. And here we have, also for 2900, Mickey's Magical Adventure by Capcom. These Capcom Disney crossover games are always cool. And 2900, but it is boxed and complete, and it's in pretty decent shape. And here, would you like to breed horses? Because they got a game for that. There's an app for that. 1800, it's 300 yen off because of, I'm guessing, damage or a missing manual. But Seiken Densetsu 3, awesome game, which I think was just re-released recently on like the Switch. So there's, you know, get that. Rockman X, but the box is quite tattered up. And I think some of the stuff inside as well. Yeah, plenty of notes there. There's damage to the cassette, everything else. And it's still 3,000 something. So I passed on that. I don't want to send anybody ratty boxes. And Super Tetris 3 for 1,500. So that's like, what, 900 yen? Something like that? Not a bad deal. Or maybe that's closer to 1,000. Have to double check on that. You might want to do that, Jim. And a copy of Super Mario Collection for 2,500, aka Super Mario All-Stars. Which is a fantastic game. 2,500, I guess that's not bad. $20 for a complete copy of that. I guess I have to always like try to like keep in my head like what does this cost in like other countries? Like I have no idea. Anyway, I got some loose Famicom games here, including Metro Cross. Not sure what that is, but we got some Rockmans here, and they're in good shape. 1,600 for this copy of Rockman 3. A little dirty on the back label, so I wanted to check this other copy. Also very clean. Back label looking real good. And it's also 1,600, so that's going home with me, Mr. Rockman. And we had a couple of copies of Rockman 4, both looking really good shape. 1,600 as well. This one I could see like there's a little bit of writing back there, like a little label damage. So I'm going to check the other one, which also looks nice and clean. But when I flipped it over, there's even more prominent writing on the back. So I left that one behind in favor of the one with the more discreet writing on it. Because a really clean Rockman 4 for 1,600 yen, about $10. Can't argue with that. And we got some more good stuff here. 480 yen on these copies of Dragon Ball. That ain't bad. That's like $3 or so. US, that is. That's the thing. Like in my head, I've always got kind of like the conversion rate up there in my head. Yen to US dollars. I think right now 100 yen, it's like 63 cents US. We got some Where's Waldo, aka Wally. I know he's referred to as Wally in other places, but we got Star Fox, 900 yen. Nice clean copy with manual. They actually had a bunch of loose carts in here that had manuals with them, and they're still priced pretty good. This especially, 1410 for Assault Suit Vulcan with manual. That's a really good deal on that. Assault Suit Vulcan is becoming a more uncommon game these days, so I was happy to pick that up. We got Nazo Puyo, some Super Street Fighter 2, clean cart, 900 yen, and manual. So I'm taking that. I mean, $5 for that. Can you really argue with that? We got some more Street Fighter. We got some Dragon Quest, some Tetris. Got some more solid games in there. But what are we looking for? Mostly I'm looking for like action games, platformers, but I want stuff that's in good shape, not dirty, not dingy. Although I can make an exception in the case of Poppin' Twinbee for $720. Not too bad on the condition of the card, just some writing on it, but that's just a good deal on that game. And it's a good game overall. $270 on Super Butoden, $720 on some Bomberman. Not bad, not bad at all. Yu Yu Hakusho Final, but the cart's really dirty and grody. Otherwise, I would have picked it up at $720. Yu Yu Hakusho Final, pretty decent. Yu Yu Hakusho one-on-one fighter by Namco, and the original Yu Yu Hakusho here. Also a dirty cart though. It's super cheap, but then I just don't want to send people like faded, grody carts, especially, you know, if I'm not going to open them up and like do open cart surgery on these things. I don't know what the condition is inside. The outside looks nice and clean. I feel like I can trust it. $480 on one of the Super Bombermans. Someone's name on it. And $270 for this Super Puyo, but wow. Kind of a grody looking back there. But what else are we looking at here? And this I thought was okay. Really clean cart, $720 for Kirby Superstar. Look how clean that is. That's nice. So that's going home with Jim. That goes on the stack. Building a nice stack here. They call me Jimmy Stacks. I don't have any money, but I do have a bunch of video games. That counts for something. A little glass case here. We got Rockman 2. Then we got Choma Kaimura back there. Turtles, the arcade game. YY World. A couple of copies of Ninja Ryu Kenden 2, which is very cool. Live Alive, Final Fight 2, Mother 2, Twinbee 3. Even some N64 stuff back there. And a Sega Saturn sitting all by its lonesome with a power cord and what have you. This, you know, like they had some Switches, DS's, other things like that. This kind of cool Zelda GameCube controller. Thought it might be like a Wavebird or something. I wasn't going to look at really like much modern stuff today, just because that's not what I'm dealing with right now. But I spotted a game and I just had to take a look at it. It's the Melty Blood game on the Switch. 19,000 yen. I don't know what the hell is up with this game. If it was released in very limited quantities or something. But that's the most expensive Switch game I've come across thus far. I mean, it's Switch. It's current gen. We're bypassing all this PS4 and whatnot. We got some PS3. Not terribly interested. But if you've got some PS1, you know I'm interested in that. So what do we got? Enemy Zero on the Saturn? No idea. Virtua Fighter Remix. And Virtua Cop for 270 yen. That's like, I don't know, $2 for a copy of Virtua Cop. So I set that aside. I'll be taking that home with me. And then we got some GameCube games here, which I don't get much request for GameCube. I think people who collect GameCube games, maybe they would prefer to just have like their own region, North American or whatever. Some Kinnikuman for $480. And there are not a ton of Japan exclusive GameCube games as well. So it seems like, I don't know, there's like less of an interest in those for people who like to collect Japanese games. Here, Kid Station. So I guess this is like a series of games made especially for like small children. I don't know. Came with special controllers. Chrono Trigger, 1100. Which I used to have back in the day. I think in the States it came as part of the, Final Fantasy Anthology or something? And then, alright, some, I guess some board game of some sort. And we got some Shin Nihon Pro Resu. for 270 yen, so I'll take that. Those 3D wrestling games are usually pretty fun. And for $2, it's like, okay. That could be like a nice little bonus sent to someone. We have one Dreamcast game, and then we got a bunch of PS1 stuff. Most of it pretty standard. 270 on this copy of Biohazard. That doesn't look too terribly bad, so I'm going to take that with me. $2 for a Biohazard, I'll take it. We got some Dragon Quest. We've got some, I don't know what the hell it is, but there you go. The Chocobo collection, though, that's pretty cool. A few games in there. It's 900 yen, and it's in really good shape. You get Chocobo Racer, Chocobo Stallion, and I think Dungeon as well. You get all three, so I set that aside. That's a pretty good deal. That's going on the stack. And we got some PS2 stuff here, including, what is this, Bonanza Bros? So some of the Sega Ages stuff, that's fine. Nightmare Before Christmas by Capcom, pretty cool. 480 yen. I'm just perusing. PS2 is another one I don't get a whole lot of requests for. 480 though, for this Hokuto no Ken Sega Ages 2500. That's pretty good on that. I'm not going to pass on that. Go on there. You get on that stack too. I'm not leaving you behind. Never leave a Fist of the North Star behind. We got some fighting games here. A handful of Kamen Rider fighters, which rhymes, so that's fun. And King of Fighters 11 for 1100 yen. That's okay on that. Dragon Ball Sparking Neo, 270 yen, but it's not Meteor, so pass on that. And then this was awesome, 270 yen for Melty Blood Act Cadenza. So that's a huge get. That's a great fighting game at only 200 yen. That's the deal of the day. And then they had the other Melty Blood at 2,700. That's Actress again, but rather than Tim Fit, I was happy with getting Act Cadenza for such a low price. So I took Act Cadenza, left Actress again, and that's all she wrote. And 3,800 finally on a copy of R-Type Final. And they had a few more things, but I was pretty happy with the stack I'd built up so far. Like I said, this was just the appetizer, so come back next time for the main course. Okay, goodbye, everybody. Hey everybody, welcome back for another Mad Panic game review that is loaded with bullets and explosions, because it's another bullet hell review today with Esp Galuda 2 on the Nintendo Switch. And I know I've been reviewing a ton of shmups recently, but what can I say? There have been a lot of great shooters released in the past few months. And as a fan of the genre, I just can't help myself. In this case, we have yet another cave shooter that was ported over by Livewire, who you might remember as the developer that gave us an amazing Switch port of Dodonpachi Resurrection. I gushed about how much I loved that game, so when I saw the same team was porting over Esp Galuda 2, I was all over it. So let's take a closer look and see if Livewire has delivered a 1-2 punch of Danmaku awesomeness, or was their port of DDP Resurrection the only trick they had to show us? So, depending on how I title this video, I probably already answered the question I just asked. But for those of you who don't typically sit all the way through game reviews, yes, this is yet another awesome port by Livewire. Just like with Resurrection, basically just a straight port of the Xbox 360 version of Esp Galuda 2, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And just like with Resurrection, we are treated to a ton of different gameplay modes here. For starters, we get both the original arcade mode and what the game calls normal mode, basically a slightly tweaked version of the original arcade optimized for consoles. And if you've never played Esp Galuda 2 before, I'd say it's one of Cave's more underappreciated shmups, overshadowed by the likes of Dodonpachi and Mushihime-sama, but an amazing shooter nonetheless. It kind of feels like a mix of Mushihime-sama and another Cave favorite of mine, Esp Raid. Here you get 3 different characters to choose from that all have varying rapid shots and laser shots, and the basic premise of the game is that you have a psi meter at the bottom of the screen that allows you to activate a bullet canceling barrier around yourself and eventually let loose a powerful energy blast. You'll also be collecting green crystals from destroyed enemies that allow you to enter a hyper mode to deal some serious damage while at the same time slowing down all of the bullets on screen and racking up tons of bonus points. The higher your crystal count is, the longer you can stay in your hyper mode. And that's basically it. Destroy enemies, collect crystals, rack up points, and try not to run out of psi energy. Otherwise, when the screen really starts to fill up with bullets, you'll be a sitting duck. These are some pretty cool gameplay features on top of what is, at its core, just a straightforward, fun, and challenging bullet hell shooter that'll keep you coming back for more. In addition to the arcade and normal modes, you also get a Black Label mode, which allows you to play as a character not available in the original game, and it makes some alterations to the gameplay, including altered bullet canceling, different enemy and bullet pattern behaviors, and even some bullet skimming, which allows you to make contact with bullets without taking damage, but only on certain areas of your character's body. It's a pretty cool deviation from the original game and still presents quite a challenge. And of course, there are novice modes included for both the original game and Black Label, which is very much appreciated. These Danmaku games can be absolutely brutal, so having a novice mode there, either for beginners or if you're like me and not especially good at these games, it's great to just get a bit of practice in and get accustomed to the gameplay mechanics without having to pull your hair out. Another very cool gameplay mode is the Arranged mode, where bullets are either blue or red, with blue bullets being cancelled out by shooting them with your rapid shot, and the red bullets being cancelled by shooting them with your laser. You can also store up to 1,000 green gems now instead of only 500, making it possible to stay in your hyper mode twice as long. So this mode in some ways is easier than the original game, and it's very fun, but at the same time keeping track of what bullets are coming at you, swapping back and forth between your fire modes, it adds a cool new dynamic to the gameplay. There's also the Omake mode, which is unlocked after you complete one of the other gameplay modes, and this one is interesting. As bullets get closer to you, they turn from blue to red and can then be cancelled. And you have an auto shield in this mode, so anytime you take a hit, as long as you've got some psi power in the tank, you'll be okay. And Omake mode throws a hell of a lot of gold point bonuses at you, especially when destroying enemies in your hyper mode, so get ready for some insane scores. This is yet another mode that shakes things up a bit and is really fun. You also get more traditional gameplay modes like training, score attack, and a very useful tutorial. So overall, this port of Espgaluda 2 is full to bursting with gameplay modes, and if you've been watching this video and hearing the music, that's great because it means I don't have to say that much about the visuals and the sound design. This game looks great, the visuals are very colorful and pleasing to the eye, and the soundtrack is awesome. Lots of high energy music that again feels kind of like a blend of other Cave game music stylings, namely Mushihime-sama and Akai Katana, but this is another home run by Livewire. The game itself is amazing, there are a ton of different ways to play, and it's been ported beautifully. So if you like a good bullet hell shooter or you're new to the genre, this release has something for everyone. It's Esp Galuda 2 on Nintendo Switch, and it's awesome.
Awesome!
Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for another exciting edition of More Games. And today, let's make this a short video, shall we? I'm getting kind of hungry. I got some 3DO games recently. I was on one of my game hunts, found like a generous stack of 3DO games. And actually have some requests for 3DO games recently. I think it's becoming kind of known, like, there's the stuff that like everybody buys, everybody collects for. Super Famicom, Sega Saturn is a big one, PC Engine. There's some other stuff where you can find good games and fairly inexpensive games out here in Japan that not very many people actually collect games for, and one of those is the 3DO. Collecting 3DO games in the US, at least, can be a bit expensive. They got those long boxes. They're very uncommon games. They're not very common here either, but there's also not a lot of interest in them. And there are actually quite a few 3DO games that were released in Japan. So I have a stack of 6 right here, and I wanted to feature these especially. I bought more. I think I probably bought like 13 or 14 of these. But I got 6 right here. Because recently I did a poll on the channel for what the next top 10 video should be, and one of the options was top 10 3DO games, and somebody questioned, are there even 10 good 3DO games, period. And there are more than 10 good 3DO games. There are actually some games on the 3DO that are pretty cool. Some of them are a little like odd for the time they were made, and they use like FMV stuff, and they're kind of weird, they're a little experimental, but there are some pretty good games on the 3DO. But today I just got 6. I think these are good examples of games on the 3DO that aren't really that bad, and more than that, some of them are actually pretty good. So we're going to start off on the top with a game that, one of the games that comes to people's minds when they think of the 3DO, probably in a good way, you know, not like plumbers don't wear ties or some dog shit like that. But Road-Phresh, hey, alright, Road-Phresh, Electronic Arts, when they were actually still a pretty cool company. Yeah, so Road-Phresh, really fun game. You get your motorcycles, you race, and you beat the hell out of other racers. You punch them, you kick them, you get sticks, you get chains, you get all that cool stuff. And that's all it is. It's a combat racing game, one of the earlier combat racing games that I can think of that I played. Actually, the first Road-Phresh game I played was, I guess it was Road-Phresh 3D on the PS1, and enjoyed it quite a lot. But this, the first Road-Phresh game on the 3DO, actually, is this the first game in the series? Or anyway, this game is pretty cool. The graphics, you know, don't look too bad, all things considered. Digitized characters and things. Some FMV cutscenes and what have you. But the gameplay is generally really fun. You just race and you beat up the other racers. And then it's got a cool licensed soundtrack. It's got Soundgarden, Hammerbox, Monster Magnet is on here. That's pretty cool. So cool soundtrack, fun gameplay. And this is another one. I think I bought this with the conversion rate. This was like $8 or something, like really inexpensive. Definitely way cheaper than the North American Road-Phresh anyway. And 3DOs are region free. So if you start buying Japanese 3DO games, obviously there's going to be, actually a lot of them, the text would still be in English. Only the ones with like a lot of voice work and stuff, like The Horde, for example. I ended up picking up a copy of the Japanese version of The Horde, and obviously it's all dubbed in Japanese and all the text is in Japanese. It's a fairly text-heavy game. Other games, though, that are not especially text-heavy, they're fine. You can play them no problem. Anyway, Road-Phresh, still a fun game, still a very cheap game on the Japanese 3DO. Next up, a game that is maligned as being like really bad, like, because there were a lot of shitty Mortal Kombat knockoffs in the 90s, and this is without a doubt a Mortal Kombat knockoff, but it's not really that bad. It is Way of the Warrior. And Way of the Warrior, the first game ever developed by Naughty Dog, which is an interesting little piece of trivia, considering after this they had like so much success with Crash Bandicoot and other various series. Way of the Warrior, it's 100% a Mortal Kombat knockoff, and it's one that hasn't been made very cheaply, as I understand it. The guys basically just made it like in their apartment. They had been working with programs for like 3D modeling for like movies or something. But then they got like a development kit for the 3DO and so made a game for it. So this game, it's very goofy, it's very silly, the characters are wacky, it's dumb. It's a dumb game, it's a dumb premise. But as far as Mortal Kombat knockoffs go, it's not that bad. It doesn't play that bad. Graphically, all things considered, I think it looks pretty good. Like, you would definitely play this before you'd play, I'd say, like Tattoo Assassins, which sucks, or the absolute worst of the worst is Shadow War of Succession. That game actually, like, made me angry. It was so bad. This is actually not too bad. It's pretty fun. The fatalities are really ridiculous. It's very silly. And the soundtrack is all White Zombie for whatever reason. I don't know how they managed to swing that and get White Zombie. And it's all music from their second to last album, Los Exorcisto, I believe is what it is. It's the album before Astro Creep, so the one with like Thunder Kiss and Welcome to the Planet and stuff. So yeah, cool soundtrack at least, White Zombie, and decent enough little fighting game. You wouldn't play this before like Killer Instinct or Street Fighter 2, but it's not that bad really. So this is a 3DO game, again, one that's way cheaper in Japan than it is in North America. There it is, Way of the Warrior. Not as bad a game as many people would have you believe. Not the best fighting game, mind you, but it's playable, it's tolerable, and it's got its quirks. Next up, just a good game on the 3DO. Again, another one that if people were thinking about what's good on the 3DO, they'll probably bring this up. But Gex, the original Gex, the side-scrolling platformer Gex. This game is fun. As a side-scrolling platformer, it's pretty good. It's nothing like terribly original. Like the visuals, it's a pretty decent looking game. I think this is like an early Crystal Dynamics game. So yeah, you go around, you collect things. Gex games are always a collect-a-thon, but you hit things with your tail, you collect little golden tokens, you climb up and down walls. All the stages have different themes. They all look pretty cool. You got like horror theme, and there's like other various stuff. Kind of like isn't there one where it's like looking like kung fu or something like that? It's like it's like kind of like a China motif. But you know, there's lots of different stages. There's a variety of enemies, bosses, obstacles, traps, all the stuff. The kind of stuff you'd expect to be in a pretty good 2D platformer. It's all in here. And then Gex, Gex is like one of those 90s characters with like attitude and stuff. So he's got all his quippy one-liner things and some little cutscenes here and there. But decent visuals, pretty good soundtrack overall, and solid gameplay. I prefer the 3D Gex games. I played a lot of Gex 2, Enter the Gecko, and Gex 3. I forget what the subtitle was for that one. But those were both fun on the PS1. I had a lot of fun with those. Going back years ago and playing the original Gex, realizing it was actually originally a 2D platformer, I had a lot of fun with it. I like this genre of games. This character is a pretty fun character. This is a pretty decent little game, and again, not too terribly expensive either. Gex on the 3DO. Another 3DO game that doesn't suck. Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to drive across here. Next up, I got a couple of fighting games here. Again, these were like really cheap. These were like, I don't know, like $10, if that. And they're both like really good ports of these games. The 3DO controller, mind you, not the best in the world for fighting games, but the ports at least are pretty good. First up, got a copy of Samurai Showdown, which is interesting because they just straight up ported the North American version. Because, as I'm sure most of you are aware, in Japan this series is called Samurai Spirits. So to pick up a Japanese copy of this game, and it's bearing the title Samurai Showdown, the North American title, I was like, what the hell is this? And apparently ported by Crystal Dynamics as well. Anyway, I don't have to say much about Samurai Showdown. It's a great game. It's SNK's much more popular samurai fighting game. They have Last Blade as well, which I really like Last Blade. But Samurai Showdown, it was huge at the time it was released. I remember playing it for the first time, seeing it in arcade, and being like, wow, that's awesome. It's like a fighting game with swords and other kinds of weapons and stuff. So great game, really good playing fighting game, really nice graphics. This approximates the arcade version pretty damn well. Like, you know, at the time there were versions on the Genesis, the SNES, and then there's a pretty damn good Sega CD version as well. So this, I would say, is probably most comparable to like the Sega CD version, but it's really good. It pretty well approximates the arcade. Good visuals, good soundtrack, solid gameplay. Can't go wrong with this one. So again, one of the two really excellent, like really top tier fighting games on the 3DO. Can't get enough of that. Samurai Showdown. Again, a cheap game. If you pick up the North American copy, I don't know how much it is. I know they're more if they come still with a long box. But speaking of great fighting games on the 3DO, I think the best fighting game on the console, and like at the time, like the best possible port you could have got of this game, Super Street Fighter 2X Grandmaster Challenge, aka Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Awesome port of this game. Again, the standard 3DO controller, it's got the 3 face buttons, it's got a couple of shoulder buttons. It's not ideal for playing fighting games. You can get that weird 6-button thing. I've actually never played with that before. I've only ever played this with just the standard 3DO controller, and still, like, it's still pretty good. It's not ideal, but it's pretty good. But you can't argue that, like, this game looks really good. It sounds really good, and the gameplay is solid. I guess this was just ported directly by Capcom, so of course they're going to do a good port of their own game. But yeah, this is just like a really nice port of Super Turbo. I did a video on Super Turbo recently and brought up the fact that it wasn't until the Street Fighter collection, I think, on the PS1 in like 1997 or 98 that I actually got to play Super Turbo, because there weren't arcades around me, and I didn't have a 3DO as a kid. But yeah, going back and playing this now, I can say this is a fantastic port of this game. Again, you would have wanted to play this. I mean, it's hard to see. I mean, obviously the control, like a 6-button Genesis controller, is just like perfect for fighting games. So Super Street Fighter 2 on the Genesis is amazing. But in terms of just like graphics and sound and overall presentation, and the fact that it's Super Turbo and you can you know, play against Goki, that's awesome as well. So this is the version you would have wanted to play in 1994. That's what I'll say. It's a really good port. Super Street Fighter 2X, the Grandmaster Challenge. Another one that's very inexpensive, like a $10 game right there, and it's excellent. And this one, this would usually be more expensive. The case is all busted up. It's one of those double cases, and I guess, I don't know, maybe it's like easy to damage those or something, or maybe somebody stepped on it, I don't know. But I can just like cannibalize, you know, a case like this from a cheaper game. But yeah, Police Knots. If you weren't aware, there is a port of Police Knots on the 3DO. I think most people know that it's like a PS1 and a Saturn game. The 3DO port, really good. You can actually play it. At one point, I had this cool like collector's box where it had the game and had a Police Knots mouse pad, and it came with a mouse as well. Because you can play this with the 3DO mouse, which is preferable because it is a point-and-click adventure game, but it also has like action shooting segments and everything, which again are better if you're playing with a mouse. But this is Hideo Kojima's, I guess, his like follow-up, like his game after Snatcher. This came out in 1995. Again, it takes a lot of inspiration from movies. It's essentially, it's like Lethal Weapon in space. Your two characters are clearly supposed to be modeled after Riggs and Murtaugh, but it's great. You go out into space and there's like murders and mystery and all that cool stuff. And so you're out there. It's got great music, nice visuals, cool like anime style, like late 80s, mid 90s anime is my personal favorite. So it's a good looking game. Now, obviously, if you pick up the Japanese version, it's all in Japanese. Well, what can you do? But if nothing else, maybe like a cool collector's piece. It's another game that's really cheap. It's like a $10 to $20 game. And in the meantime, if you can just, go play like a translated ROM or something. But Policenauts is a good game, and if you didn't know, it has a 3DO port in Japan. And if you're collecting 3DO games, as I once was, this is something that's worth adding to the collection, because it's a pretty damn cool game. Policenauts. Good stuff. And that's it. I told you this was going to be kind of a quicker one. 6 3DO games that I picked up recently, 6 cheap games, and 6 games that don't suck. And there's more. Killing Time, for example. I didn't find a copy of Killing Time. But Killing Time is a pretty fun game, first-person shooter. 3DO Doom is okay, except for the fact that I think there's no music, but it looks and plays good and everything else. There's Twisted, a game called Twisted that me and my friends really liked back when I was spending all my Walmart paychecks on games off of eBay. I picked up a 3DO with a bunch of games, and we played Twisted, the game show game. We played quite a lot of that. So there's actually some games on the 3DO that are not terrible. It's not all just, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties and ports of I don't know, Sewer Shark and Corpse Killer. There's actually some decent playing games. So yeah, there you go. Maybe in the future a top 10 3DO game list is in order. The people didn't vote for that though. If you didn't know, you can look at my community tab. Sometimes I post polls, polling people what should the next top 10 video be, or what other kind of video suggestions are there, and I post thumbnails. I give people updates on what kind of videos are coming up in the near future, because the channel now, it's kind of like a mix of things. We're doing game reviews and sort of little retrospective things. We're doing game hunts. We're doing arcades. It's almost like I've taken a couple of different channels and smashed them together. So the schedule for releasing content is different kind of videos each day. So go and check out the community tab if you want to keep up to date on that stuff. Or you can go follow my Facebook page, my Twitter page, whatever. That's all down in the description. I usually don't do the social media self-promotion stuff, but hey, what the hell? Go check it out if you want more Mad Panic gaming goodness. Anyway, those are some 3DO games. Let me know down in the comments, do you have any favorite 3DO games? And what are they? I'd certainly like to know. And until next time, thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you then. Goodbye. Hey everybody, welcome back for another Mad Panic game review, and today we're getting wrecked because we're taking a look at the one, the only Wreckfest. I recently rekindled my love of racers with games like Cruisin' Blast, Horizon Chase Turbo, and the remake of Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. So when I was browsing Amazon for another good racing game on the Switch, I came across Wreckfest. And I thought it looked pretty cool, and when I saw that it was developed by Bugbear, the same developer as the Flatout series, that was enough for me to make a purchase, and I am so glad that I did because I immediately fell in love with this game. It's honestly a bit confusing why it isn't held in as high regard as the other racing games I just mentioned, so I figured, what the hell? Let's give this thing a proper review and spread the mangled metal gospel that is Wreckfest, where the only commandment is drive fast and die last. The meat and potatoes of Wreckfest is, of course, the racing, and right away, you're given the option of just playing around on any track you want with any vehicle and number of opponents you like. But if you really want to get the most out of Wreckfest, you'll want to spend a lot of time in the career mode. This mode offers you a ton of different circuits to race in, and each circuit features a variety of fun events. Most of your time will be spent trying to win races, sometimes against a field of other racers, and sometimes against a single opponent, but you will also be participating in destruction derbies, which are a ton of fun, as the only goal is to just smash up everything in sight, something I'm quite good at, if I do say so myself. But you'll also get to participate in fun gimmick races as well. where you'll be required to drive more unusual vehicles like lawnmowers and school buses on your way to victory. This is also how you'll unlock more cars and detailing options, as winning races earns you money and also increases your experience level. Every time you level up, more customizable parts become available in your garage. So while you start out with a car you wouldn't really write home about, you'll eventually amass an entire fleet of absolute wrecking machines that any demolition racer would be proud of. You can tool around with your car's speed, acceleration, handling, and of course, give it some gnarly paint jobs, I myself being partial to black and green. The racing itself is intense and fun and strikes a nice balance between arcade racer and something a little more grounded in reality. So while it's not exactly Gran Turismo, you will need to drive with a bit of smarts if you want to win these races. But of course, with this being a demolition racer, you've got free reign to smash and bash the other racers at your leisure, and you'll be forgiven for driving like an absolute maniac. That's honestly my first instinct when I get behind the wheel of a car, so it's nice to play a racer that actually encourages my more destructive tendencies rather than penalizing them. When you want to take a break from the career mode, there are a few others to enjoy, but I spent a ton of time with the exhibition mode, where you can put together any kind of race you want. If you want to put together a race featuring nothing but motorized couches, you can absolutely do that. Or if you'd rather throw together a demolition derby consisting of nothing but RVs in a big Thunderdome type scenario, that's also an option. The possibilities are almost limitless, and all of the various vehicles and tracks are available from the start. So this is a perfect option for anyone that just wants to jump in and have some quick fun without going race by race in the career mode. And I honestly had such a great time with this game. For a title I'd never heard of before randomly coming across it on Amazon while looking at other racing games, I was 110% satisfied with the gameplay. The only thing left to talk about is the graphics and sound design, and there's honestly not very much to say. For a Switch game, Wreckfest looks pretty damn good, about as good as its PS4 counterpart anyway. There's plenty of detail on all of the vehicles and tracks, including 2 tracks that are actually taken from Carmageddon and thus have a throwback low poly look. But in general, this is a decent looking game, no real complaints in that regard, and the soundtrack is just okay, I guess. It's a lot of licensed rock music and even some tracks that have a more synth rock sound, and most of the bands are actually from Finland. It's not terrible, but also not anything that's terribly memorable. The sound effects are awesome though, both the sounds of the engines running, as well as the very satisfying crunch of metal on metal. So that's it. Wreckfest, in a nutshell, is just a fun and addictive demolition racer with some decent graphics and sound, all things considered. It's a game that I feel has been mostly overlooked, and to be fair, it wasn't exactly a high-profile release or anything, but this is a game that I think any racing fan would be happy to play. It's a quality title for sure, and it's a damn good time. If you've got a soft spot for some automotive destruction, then definitely give Wreckfest a try because it's awesome.
Awesome! Let's get scratching.
Hey everybody, Jim here, joined again today by the Jared. Oh my God, the Jared, the super famous Jared, everyone. Today we are in the Tokyo neighborhood of Odaiba. This place is pretty awesome, bright, beautiful spring day today. Lots of cool stuff to do in Odaiba. For example, they have the Gundam, the giant Gundam unicorn, which is awesome, great tourist attraction. Directly next to us, they have Sega Joypolis, which is actually a really cool indoor Sega amusement park, I guess you could say. Yeah. That's all awesome. We're not here for any of that today. We're here because we want to play some retro games. And right next to us, there's a place called the Daiba Game Hall. Jared, how do you think some retro games would suit you today?
I feel like that's exactly what I need right now.
That's exactly what he needs right now. So let's go check it out, Daiba Game Hall. This is going to be awesome. Check this out.
Let's do it.
Japan, 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 Japan. Round one. Fight, fight, fight.
All right, so here we are. We're in the Daiba Game Plaza. Very busy, very crowded Sunday today. One thing to note about this place, it's not just an arcade. There's like tons of cool shops and everything's like really retro. There's like retro candy stores, toy stores, all that kind of stuff. A very like nostalgic vibe in here. And it feels almost less like an arcade and more of like a carnival atmosphere, something like that, a festival in here. So that's pretty cool. Well, they got an indoor amusement park next door. It makes sense they'd have an indoor festival as well. Why the hell not? Anyway, Jared, are you ready to go play some video games?
Ready.
Let's do it. One thing I just wanted to point out really quickly, they have a bunch of pinball machines here, which is just awesome in general. Very rarely do I come across any pinball. I myself.
Jungle Princess.
Jungle Princess, right here, all you can play, baby. Some of them are out of order, which is, I think, to be expected. Pinball takes quite a bit of mechanics to keep them running, but they got a lot of machines to play. I myself, not exactly a pinball wizard, but I do like to play whenever I can. So let's, I don't know, get in line, it looks like, and play some pinball. Everybody, we're having a pretty good time so far. And look who we ran into, coincidentally.
Hey, it's me, totally by coincidence.
It's our old buddy Sam.
Hey.
You availed yourself to Dippin' Dots.
The only Dippin' Dots in Japan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they used. Yeah, I think so.
Right here.
I'm gonna say.
Right here in Odaiba, if you want Dippin' Dots, there's only one place to get it. Sam, we're having a good time. We're playing some games. What do you think of this place?
This place is great. I don't know any other places that have as many cool pinball machines like Flintstones and Super Mario Brother. But the only thing that sucks is that I think they purposely put machines that aren't interesting in this area just to create a rest space for everybody else when they don't want to go to the other games.
Well, I appreciate that because a nice little rest spot is what I need because there's a lot of stuff in here and there's a million bajillion people.
Yeah.
Sam, eat your Dippin' Dots. Let's go play some games.
Let's go.
Here we go. All right, now we come to what is probably my favorite little section we've come to today. A lot of cool, like, sit-down cabinets, really old retro stuff. Cocktail cabs. We've got Xevious, Gradius. We've got Space Invaders of all things. Puyo Puyo are really cool. And then all over the walls, there are tons of like posters of like 80s and 90s bands. There's Jump comics, like wall to wall. Very cool, like old school nostalgic feel here. Jared, you've been to some arcades with me in the past. How do you think this one stacks up to some of the others we've been to, like in Yokohama or Shinjuku?
In terms of novelty, the top.
Very top.
Yeah, for sure.
Novelty, but games, in terms of games.
Honestly, because I did really well at that point blank machine.
You did?
I'm going to say up at the top for
all
that
right.
as well.
Hey, if Jared's happy, then we're all happy. Anyway, check out some more of this kick-ass gameplay footage. You're doing pretty good over there, buddy.
Yeah, I only died 5 times.
Yeah. All right, so that's the Daiba Game Hall. This place is awesome. It is like super crowded. If you were gonna come here, I'd say maybe don't pick a Sunday to come, if at all you can help it.
Before Golden Week.
right before Golden Week, right before a holiday, come on a Sunday. Yeah, it's pretty packed, but there's lots of fun stuff in here. There's lots of games. We played some sit-down cabs, we played some shoot-'em-ups, some racing games, we played some pinball. We're gonna eat some candy. We had some Dippin' Dots.
Yeah, that was good.
We bashed our knees on those cocktail cabinets. That was a lot of fun. So yeah, the Daiba Game Hall. Jared, you have a good time?
I'd say yeah, for sure.
Jared says he had a good time, so it was a great time. Sam?
10 out of 10, Jim, would come again.
10 out of 10 would come again. The Daiba Game Hall, everybody, if you're going to be visiting Tokyo anytime in the near future, come to Odaiba for all kinds of fun stuff. But while you're here, make sure you stop in to the Daiba Game Hall. It kicks ass.
Yeah.
And with that, Thanks for watching, everybody. Mad Panic Gaming. Like, subscribe, all that cool stuff, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Hey everybody, Jim here, and welcome back to Mad Panic Gaming, where today fists will fly and countless skulls will be bashed in, because we're taking a look at some of the best beat-em-ups ever to grace an arcade cabinet. If you're a fan of games where you walk to the right and beat the bejesus out of anything that wanders on screen, then these are the games for you. So let's get started with what is undoubtedly one of the greatest beat-em-ups ever made, and that is 1994's Aliens vs. Predator. Developed and published by Capcom, this game was released at a time when they were on a roll with one great beat-em-up after another, including titles like The Punisher, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, and Dungeons and Dragons. But this game arguably sits atop all of them as the best belt-action brawler that Capcom ever produced. The game begins with Major Dutch Schaefer and Lieutenant Lynn Kurosawa of the Colonial Marine Corps being cornered by a swarm of xenomorphs when they're suddenly bailed out by two predators, whom they then form an alliance with in order to put an end to this alien menace. But they will also have to go head-to-head with the treacherous Weyland-Yutani Corporation, who predictably are attempting to use the xenomorphs as weapons. The four playable characters all bring something unique to the table. Dutch is super strong, Lynn is fast and has some killer combos, but for me, this being Aliens vs. Predator and all, I always go with one of the two playable Predators. They're strong as hell, can jump clear across the screen, come equipped with melee weapons, and have their trademark shoulder cannons which can blast xenomorphs into quivering bits. Dutch and Lynn, on the other hand, have an arm cannon and a pistol respectively, which are both effective, but nothing beats a good fiery explosion. You can punch, slam, and blast the hell out of legions of enemies, but something else that makes this game so awesome is the amount of weapons at your disposal, especially a little later in the game when you're confronted by large groups of Colonial Marines. You'll get your hands on pulse rifles, smart guns, grenades, various melee weapons, and there's even a power-up that grants you unlimited projectile attacks for a brief period. So when that happens, just go crazy, blasting any and everything that moves. When you've got a co-op game going and the screen fills up with enemies coming at you from all directions, AVP gets very chaotic very quickly, and it is a hell of a lot of fun. Again, some of the best gameplay to ever come from an arcade beat-em-up, and that covers a lot of ground. On top of that, this is a great looking game with some outstanding character and stage designs, lots of attention to detail, and a wide variety of enemy types to keep things from getting too repetitive. The soundtrack is honestly pretty lackluster, but you just can't argue with those sound effects taken directly from the Aliens and Predator movies. So overall, this game is about as solid and fun as a beat-em-up gets, and if you've never played it, you're really missing out. Aside from the arcade game itself, AVP has only had a home release once when it was included in that big Capcom home arcade plug-and-play thing. So if you don't have one of those, MAME is your best friend. Aliens vs. Predator is a bona fide classic. Next up, let's switch gears to something a bit more gory and goopy, and that is 1993's Night Slashers, developed by Data East. And this is a game that feels like it would have been tailor-made for me, as I was a huge fan of not only video games as a kid, but also horror movies, with zombie flicks like Return of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead being some of my favorites. So what could be better than a beat 'em up that has you taking on the legions of the undead? The plot centers around an all-out assault on humanity from the forces of darkness, including zombies, werewolves, vampires, and even the Grim Reaper himself. You've got 3 playable characters to choose from. There's Jack, the cybernetically enhanced monster hunter from the USA, Christopher, the English vampire hunter who feels like a cross between Van Helsing and Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Hong Hua, a Chinese demon slayer with some seriously kick-ass kung fu moves. Each character is useful in their own way, predictably featuring variations to their speed and attack strength. But something they all have in common is an assortment of attacks that can make quick work of the ghouls and monsters Night Slashers throws at you. Most beat-em-ups at the time gave their characters a basic combo and a super attack that sacrifices a bit of health, but here there's a bit more to it than that. Of course, you have your standard combo, but you can also perform a charge attack by holding down the attack button, which becomes more effective the longer you hold it. And you get the prerequisite radius attack performed by pressing the jump and attack buttons at the same time, but if you're playing co-op, you can also perform some team attacks such as the double pile driver, or launch your teammate into the air for a devastating dive attack. And finally, you can perform a screen-clearing super attack with the push of a button, but this does take away a significant portion of your health. Couple all of that with the various weapons the game tosses your way, and you've got a variety of methods for destroying the undead hordes, and you'll need to make use of all of them as Night Slashers does not go easy on you. The sheer volume of enemies you'll take on at once is a sight to behold, and the bosses you encounter will definitely put your skills to the test. In particular, the final couple of bosses are maddeningly cheap. So it's a good thing I'm playing on an emulator and not draining my bank account to make it through this one. Regardless, Night Slashers is a hell of a lot of fun and features some fantastic visuals and sound design, especially if you're playing the uncensored Japanese version. Aside from the arcade, Night Slashers is also available digitally on the Nintendo Switch, and there's even an HD remake on the way, which looks pretty damn cool. So if you like a little bit of blood and guts in your beat-em-ups, it doesn't get much better than Night Slashers. Now we move away from zombies and monsters and onto swords and sorcery, with 1991's Warrior Blade Rastan Saga Episode 3, which was developed by Taito, and if you actually had the pleasure of playing this one in an arcade, it utilized Taito's big double screen setup that they also use for games like Ninja Warriors and Darius 2. Which I imagine must have been pretty cool, but alas, it's not quite as impressive when playing on emulator, but that can be forgiven because this game is 100% awesome. Warrior Blade has a lot in common with Sega's Golden Axe games, but if I'm being completely honest, I'd actually rather play Warrior Blade any day of the week. You get 3 playable characters to choose from, but with this being a Rastan game, I really only want to play as the man himself, as he's basically Conan the Barbarian. I myself being a big fan of Conan, both the movies and the long-running comic series. In terms of gameplay, Warrior Blade has a lot in common with most other beat-em-ups from the day, though it could probably better be described as a hack and slash, but I'm willing to make an exception. You have one attack button, a jump button, and of course you can perform jump attacks as well as dash attacks, but you can also find plenty of power-ups to aid you in your quest, such as a battle axe that temporarily increases your attack strength, or better yet, a fire amulet that allows you to shoot fireballs from your sword for a brief period. The best power-up though comes in the form of your wizard companion, Mahadi Dekaradi. His name is a mouthful, but when you've got this guy on your side, he can unleash powerful magic spells on your enemies, freezing them, shocking them, or turning them all into stone, which makes them easy pickings for you. After the game's introductory stage, you can choose the order in which you complete the rest of the stages, and at the conclusion of each one, you take on a boss battle, which can be anything from a giant kraken to an evil undead wizard. And after you defeat them, you gain a piece of treasure that also upgrades your abilities in some way, such as increased attack and defensive power or more powerful magic attacks. And aside from the standard hackin' and slashin', you'll also do battle on horseback or, coolest of all, taking to the skies on the back of a dragon for a bit of aerial combat. In general, Warrior Blade is a lot of fun. It's just a good old-fashioned hack and slash with a few cool little gimmicks thrown in for good measure, but it's made just that much better by the awesome setting and characters. You take on barbarians, monsters, wizards, the undead, and the entire game captures perfectly what I love about the swords and sorcery genre. It's kick-ass high adventure from start to finish, all with great graphics and an awesome soundtrack. Aside from the arcade, the only console release Warrior Blade ever saw was on the PS2 in Japan only, as part of the Taito Memories Collection Volume 2. So whatever way you can, definitely give Warrior Blade a try. It's what's best in life. Next up, since we've been looking at a lot of aliens, monsters, and barbarians, let's switch over to something a little more whimsical, and that's 1992's Hook by Irem. No, seriously, this game is awesome. When you hear the name Hook, your mind probably goes to the console games, which were pretty bad. But if you've never played the arcade game, or possibly didn't even know there was one, I'm here to tell you that if you're a beat-em-up fan, you should play it, because as someone who's only played this game for the first time very recently, I was honestly shocked by how fun it is. For starters, this game does support up to 4 players at a time and features 5 playable characters. There's Peter Pan, of course, who is the all-around best character in the game, as you might expect, but you also have the option of playing as 4 of the Lost Boys. First and foremost is Rufio, alive and well, thank you very much, as well as Ace, Pockets, and Thudbutt. That's right, the fat kid that can roll himself into a ball was named Thudbutt, something I personally never knew before playing this game. So you've got a bunch of characters to choose from that each have different attacks and special abilities, and Hook plays a lot like any other beat-em-up. You've got a basic attack combo, as well as a super attack that drains a bit of health, and you can attack downed opponents to your heart's content, which is admittedly very satisfying. Watching Pockets and Peter Pan stomp out some pirates is something I never knew I wanted to see, but I got a kick out of it. You also have plenty of weapons to make use of, such as spears, baseballs, and bombs, and something especially cool is that there are stage hazards that you can trigger to hurt your enemies, such as cutting a rope to drop an anchor on their head, or smacking a bunch of pots and pans into their face. You'd think a game that features a bunch of little kids fighting pirates wouldn't get very brutal, but hey, the Lost Boys didn't come to lose. You bash and smash the hell out of these guys, up to and including the dastardly Captain Hook and his right-hand man, Mr. Smee. Really, the only thing this game is missing is some good bonus stages. I would love a good flying stage, or possibly even something featuring the mermaids. That aside though, Hook is a very fun and well-made beat-em-up that I honestly forgot was supposed to be a movie license game while I was playing it. The visuals are pretty good for the time the game was made, the source material is put to good use, and the soundtrack is pretty good too, utilizing some recognizable tunes from the movie. If you've only ever played the crappy console games and wish there was at least one decent game based on Hook, your prayers were answered, because this game is awesome. Next up, since I can't rightly make a video about arcade beat-em-ups and not mention at least one Konami classic, let's take a look at 1991's The Simpsons, because this is another instance of a license that had some pretty bad console games made based on it, but the arcade game, on the other hand, was nothing short of excellent. A beat-em-up probably wasn't the first thing that people thought of at the time when they thought of The Simpsons, but if history has taught us anything, it's that you can take basically any TV show or movie and make a game where its main characters are beating the hell out of any and everything that wanders on screen. I was a massive fan of The Simpsons as a kid, and when this game was released, the second season of the show was just wrapping up. It's hard to explain now just how much of a phenomenon The Simpsons was to someone who wasn't around at the time. The President of the United States literally mentioned it in a public address, though he seemed like he didn't really care much for the show. Anyway, this game starts off with Mr. Smithers and some goons in the midst of a heist when a diamond ends up in Maggie's mouth. So instead of just removing the diamond, Smithers runs off with the entire baby. So it's up to the rest of the Simpson family to track him down and get Maggie back, ultimately culminating in a final battle with Mr. Burns in a mech suit. And even after all of that, he still couldn't remember Homer's name. The Simpsons is a very fun and frantic beat-em-up that controls more or less the same as the first TMNT game. So you have a standard attack and a more powerful attack that can be performed by pressing both the jump and attack buttons at the same time. And as a nice change from most beat-em-ups, it doesn't sacrifice any health. All four Simpsons family members are playable and each feels unique from the others, and multiplayer is really the only way to go with this one. That's the thing with Konami beat-em-ups, they're insanely fun in co-op but get kind of boring when playing solo. Anyway, you beat up a bunch of bad guys, play some pretty cool little mini games, and enjoy some awesome cutscenes. A fun game overall, but it can't be denied that the visuals, sound design, and use of the license are what really put this game over the top. It's so incredibly colorful and really captures the look of those early seasons of the show. Lots of recognizable characters and locations make appearances, and stages like the cemetery and the dream sequence are especially visually stunning. Add on top of that a soundtrack that mixes the music from the show with that very recognizable early 90s Konami sound, and even plenty of voice clips from the show's cast, and you've got an overall presentation that satisfied all of us young Simpsons fans in 1991, even if some of us weren't tall enough to reach the controls yet. This game is still an absolute classic. Finally, to wrap things up, I wanted a game that was wacky, over the top, and quite simply an absolute blast to play. And I settled on the one and only Yaku Kakuto League Man, or as it's known outside of Japan, Ninja Baseball Batman. This is yet another game that I had never even heard of until some other YouTubers shined a light on it. Most notably the Angry Video Game Nerd when he featured it in one of his videos. With a premise like this, I pretty much had to play it. The story kicks off with a bunch of golden artifacts being stolen from the Baseball Hall of Fame. So it's up to a group of superheroes, the titular Ninja Baseball Batmen, to recover them. They go all across the United States to get the artifacts back, only to discover that when they're all combined, they can grant insane powers to whoever possesses them. This game is, in its premise and its gameplay, absolutely nuts. It supports up to 4 players and immediately throws a ton of insane characters at you to be pounded into oblivion. Giant evil baseball equipment, robots, anthropomorphic airplanes, and slot machines. If something can have arms and legs attached to it and made to attack you, you'll encounter it in this game. Each of the 4 playable characters has a unique fighting style and set of stats, and they each have quite a few attacks at their disposal. You've got your basic combination, dash attacks, air dash attacks, and super attacks, more so if your health goes into the red. Even though your characters are already wielding weapons, there are even more to pick up, such as additional baseball bats, ninja shurikens, and a devastating home plate that can be lobbed at enemies. There's even a power-up that summons a squad of cheerleaders to annihilate everything on screen with their insane levels of pep. The Predators have their shoulder cannons, the X-Men have their mutant powers, and the Punisher has a near limitless supply of guns and grenades. But the Ninja Baseball Batman, they have cheerleaders of death. So who are you picking in a fight? Anyway, the gameplay here is the definition of the word frantic, but it's extremely fun, especially with some other players handy, and this is one that when you start playing it, you pretty much have to finish it. It's also not nearly as cheap and unforgiving as some other beat-em-ups, instead offering what feels like a more fair challenge without being too easy. And as with every game I've talked about today, the graphics and sound really make this a memorable game. Beat-em-ups typically aren't all that different from each other in terms of gameplay, so presentation counts for a lot. And with its vibrant colors, insane character designs, and upbeat soundtrack, this is one game that definitely stands out from the crowd. If you're a fan of the genre and still haven't given this game a try, stop what you're doing and play it immediately, because Ninja Baseball Batman is something very special.
Japan! 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 Round 1. Fight, fight, fight you! Yeah, fight!
Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for another game hunt here in Japan on this glorious, wonderful, overcast, gray day. Today I was in the neighborhood of Yanokuchi, which is in southwest Tokyo, kind of very close to being in Kanagawa, but not quite. It's like right on the border. Came here today because I discovered that there is a hard-off in town, a rather large hard-off, in fact, that I had never been to before, so I wanted to go on one of my game hunting runs. I went to a book off first and found some good stuff, and then I got back on the train in the hopes that I would find even more great games in Yanokuchi. So I was ready to either have my heart broken or to be elated with all the great retro gaming goodness I discovered. So stick around and go on this game hunt with me, because that is what's coming up next. Alright, getting started with consoles and things. I think I actually want to put the exchange rate up there. Thank you. 7,700 on a Wii Neo Geo stick. I didn't know there was a Wii Neo Geo stick. 77 on a Saturn there, and 88 on this Dreamcast, which is nice and whitey white. It was in there pretty good though. Rather than tempt fate, I let it go. And then some Saturns with a hell of a tan on them. Gotta come down on price on those. 7,700 though on some of these mini consoles. That ain't so bad. It's like $50. 16.5 for a 3DO FZ10, the top loader. Don't see too many of those while on my travels. We've got a bunch of 64s and 14.3 on a Victor Saturn, which is also really cool. That's something else I don't see too often. Nice Victor Saturn. Usually I just see the gray or the whites. The Hitachi and the Victor, less common. 16.5 on a boxed Dreamcast, and we got some Mega Drives here. This is where it gets tricky, pulling this stuff from the top shelf. 16.5 boxed Mega Drive 1, and surprisingly enough, this Mega Drive 2 was also 16.5, and that is surprising. Usually the Model 2, that's a little more expensive than the Model 1, but they're both priced evenly. These Super Famicom decks, pretty cheap, $2,200 on this Turbo Graphics, PC Engine Duo. It's got an Avenue Pad 3 with it too. That's pretty cool. $2,200. That's about $170, $160. Pretty nice. $1,100 and $1,200 on these GameCubes, including the Orange Spice, which I know when it comes to Japanese GameCubes, people like their Orange Spice. And $13,200 on this Core Graphics with nothing on it. I don't know why they're charging $13,200 when you don't have cables, you don't have a controller, you got nothing. And this is pretty cool as well. Also $13,200 on this Casio. It says MX10. It's an MSX, which is really cool. Don't come across too many of those, the old school PCs. And $1,100 on a complete Super Famicom. It's got everything with it. It looks pretty good too. And then this Famicom is nice and white, not too discolored. $8,800. That's actually not too bad on that. That's about $60 for a boxed Famicom in pretty good condition. We've got some more box stuff down here. We got some Saturns, as you can see. Some more Super Famicoms in 64s. In terms of consoles, they had quite a lot. They got Wii U's, not something I'm usually in the market for. Some PS2s, mostly the fat boys. I had a fat PS2 back in the day, don't mind telling you. And some different colors, etc., etc. We get into the PS3s and PS4s. That's kind of where I'm out of the game. Too modern for me. And some controllers as well. All the controllers you can handle, baby. Anyway, some consoles to get us started. Pretty cool stuff. Not bad prices either. Follow the Kirbys to fortune and glory. Hey, there's a handsome guy. Yeah, we got some cool stuff in here. Gonna take a look real quick, but first, Mega Drive Mini 11,000, excuse me, but 66,000 on a Mega Drive with Mega CD. That's insane. I can't even fathom it. We're looking at some cool handheld stuff. We got some Neo Geo Pockets, Game Boy Advance SPs. That really blew me away. And then an AES deck, 66,000 yen. And a 17,000 Core Graphics there. That's actually pretty good on that. But 66,000 yen, where did they get that number? That's insane. And that handsome guy is back. Hello. 5,500 on Guardian Heroes. That's pretty good. 14.3 on this like really good looking Valis. We got some Parodius. We got some other cool stuff in there. But yeah, that blew me away. I don't know where the number 66,000 came from. That's well, I just don't know what to say about that. 8,800 on a really good condition Mario Bros. We got some YY World. We got some Castlevania. We got all the good stuff. Akumajo Densetsu. Excuse me. How dare I call it Castlevania. Here's something. When I walk into a place and I see this, a bunch of games down at my ankles, I really don't like that. Getting harder and harder to like bend down to those hard to reach places these days. 1,800 on Gambare Goemon 4. 1980 after tax. That's really good price on that. Boxed and complete and in really great condition. So I make a mental note of that. That could be one of my finds of the day later. Some Game Gear. Gunstar Heroes. That's really cool. Some Wonder Swan. And other various handheld things. Very nice. I usually don't come across boxed handheld stuff. It's kind of rare. Got some Kunio-kun. Pinball of the Dead on the GBA. That's pretty cool. We got some Pokemons, which I don't get a whole lot of requests for, but there they are. And we've got some Famicom disc as well. Always nice to see that. Some Zelda action and some Dirty Pair. For those of you that didn't know, yeah, there's a Dirty Pair game on the Famicom disc, and it's okay, I guess. More really nice looking boxed Super Famicom stuff. Just a collage of colors here. The Marios, the Aladdins, the Sailor Moons, and it's all priced pretty good. I think the book off we were just at in the previous video had better prices, but these still aren't terrible. $38.50 on Patlabor, $38.50 on Goemon 2, which is really good, and $4,400 on Yu Yu Hakusho Final. We got plenty more though. This, cool, I never come across this game, but it is Rock and Roll Racing, $71.50. I like that a lot. Mother 2. All the good stuff. Got some Tiny Toons. I love Tiny Toons on the Famicom or the NES. Got some Kirby. All the good ones. And the lone Mega Drive game, Galaxy Force 2, baby. A lot of really good condition box stuff here. And some loose carts as well. We got our Contras. We got our Akumajo Densetsu. We got all that stuff. Layla, which I don't think I've ever played Layla, but I hear good things. Kid Dracula. And then 33 on Rockman 2. Which again was actually cheaper at the place we were just at. 55 on one of the Super Famicom memory cart things. Holds a bunch of ROMs on it, so that's pretty cool. GS Mikami 29.7 though. I thought this was cool. I'd never seen one of these before. Chrono Trigger sample ROM. So it's like a demo of Chrono Trigger from back in the day. 8800 on Captain Commando, Super Back to the Future 2, Kiki Kai Kai 11,000. That one's not getting any cheaper. 6600 on Umihara Kawase, and Super Alesta 5500. My favorite Super Famicom shoot 'em up. Lots of good games. Prices kinda, they're not terrible, but they're not getting any better. And I have to keep in mind, I don't really know, like I don't really know how these compare to the prices overseas, to SNES games and what have you in the US. 2,000 on a complete Final Fight 2, which is also pretty good on that. 2,000 on anything boxed and complete is okay. And then this Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers with a nice looking box and everything in there, unless otherwise noted. It's got the inserts, got the manual, all that goodness, and one of my favorite Japan exclusive Super Famicom games for 1,500, Tetris Battle Gaiden. Really great game, really fun competitive puzzle game. I actually included it in my top 10 Japan exclusive Super Famicom videos from many years ago. Really like that game. Anytime I come across it, if it's a good price, I'll go for it, because not only do I love it, I'm pretty sure many other people will love it too, but we're looking at just like a lot of Super Famicom games. And again, my knees, people. Consider my knees. And then we have all these loose Super Famicom games. I'm just going to kind of gloss over these. We'll see what I picked up later when I do my finds of the day. But they've got lots of copies of the Goemons, Super Donkey Kong. We got Final Fight 2 over there. All kinds of good stuff. Boxed Famicom games. We got some Kunio. I always forget the Japanese subtitle for this one. It's one of the athletic games in that series, and this was like insane. 3,600 on this. A copy of Makaimura, Ghosts and Goblins, and it's like in great shape, like almost perfect condition. I don't know how that is. That game's older than I am, and somehow the box is in better shape than I am. So that's fantastic. But more of these loose carts. Again, this video could be like 3 hours long if it was just me digging through all of these carts. And also, I gotta maneuver around some people. I'm not shopping alone here, folks. We got some Dreamcast stuff here. Most of it really not like shaking my tree. We got Tomb Raider, big deal. Code Veronica, still 300 yen. That's like the cheapest game ever. And we got some Saturn games as well. They had a handful of pretty decent Saturn games. 3,000 here, Street Fighter Collection. So it's got, what does it have? It has like Turbo and Super Turbo and I want to say Alpha 2. Saturn Bomberman, no manual though, so I have to pass on that. I don't take jewel case games without manuals, because then you also don't have a cover. King of Fighters 96 for 1,200 yen, 1,320 after tax. Just the disc itself, without the cartridge that comes along with it. And then sitting right next to it was a complete copy that I just kind of like glossed over. Mostly because I'm trying like not to elbow people in the back. You can see camera angles get a little bit tight as I'm in here. Darius Twin, fantastic game. I think I picked that up today. We got Rushing Beat, Mario. We got some loose N64 games as well. Super Swiv, which is awesome. And then you didn't see it because I'm a terrible cameraman, but they also had a Turtles in Time that you might see popping up later in the video. We've got a handful of PC Engine games here. Kind of disappointing. If I see a bunch of PC Engine spines, I'll get really excited. Cobra 2, that's pretty cool. But a lot of the hard-offs recently these days, the PC Engine section kind of runs together. R-Type 2, alrighty. And Puzzle Boy. I don't know anything about Puzzle Boy. I don't think I've ever played that one. But I did play R-Type, and I like it a lot. Nectaris, which if I'm not mistaken is like a strategy game. Not a lot of demand for those. F1 Circus. Bomberman 94. 5,000 yen on that, though. That's... yeah, I pass on that. 4,000 on that one. I don't know what the hell is wrong with it. But yeah, usually like for that kind of price, like, you might as well just go to Akihabara or something. Yeah, so this book off kind of flabbergasted me. Some of their games are priced right. 2,700 on Darius Gaiden. Speaking of priced right, that's a damn fine game, and that's a damn fine price on it. That was something I was definitely coming back for, and a complete Saturn Bomberman with some issues, I guess. And Sonic R. Love the soundtrack. The game itself is kind of not good at all. Kind of dog shit. Sakura Wars Columns, nice, but it's super, super sun-faded. So I had to pass on that. And what else we got? We got some Rockman. I'm sorry, some Puyo Puyo Sun. Getting ahead of myself. Some Rockman X4. And for whatever reason, probably just because my knees were killing me, I had to stand up and just take a gander at that. 4,000 yen. For an X4 on the Saturn, that's actually still a pretty good price. Usually I see it for about 6,000. And we have a complete copy of Real Bout, which is awesome. I do like anything in the Fatal Fury series. But we got all that, and then I'm not even fighting for those Famicom games. On to the next bit. Okay, for the final stretch of this video, we got some PS2 and PS1, starting 2,500, the Gekko no Kenshi collection, and 6,600 on a game that's becoming less and less common these days. It is Hokuto no Ken, developed by Arc System Works, published by Sega, and just straight up one of the most kick-ass 2D fighters ever, as it would have to be. If it's a combination of Fist of the North Star, Arc System Works, and Sega, like you can't go wrong. Battle Stadium DON always catches my eye. 800 yen. Pretty cool little game. Smash Brothers style game with some anime characters. Fate Stay Night. I actually hate that game because every time I see it, I think it's Fate Unlimited Codes, and I am disappointed because I grab unlimited codes whenever I can. Because that's one people tend to like, and it's fairly inexpensive. King of Fighters 2003 for 1,000 yen. That's okay. And then for 1,500, 1,650 after tax. King of Fighters 11, quite possibly my favorite King of Fighters game. It's really, really good. We got some more stuff here. Again, a lot of stuff to gloss over. But we got some fighting bundles. We got Third Strike and Capcom vs. SNK 2 in a value pack. So you get 2 great games for the price of 2 great games. It's like, yeah, it's over 3,000 yen when those individual games are really cost effective. The Zero Collection, 1,500 on Third Strike. So there you go. Not too shabby. And then the Hyper Street Fighter 2 Anniversary edition. I was going to say collection. There's no collection. It's just an edition. But I do believe you get to watch the Street Fighter 2 anime on there. So that's pretty cool. Armored Core. But we move over to PS1. We got some Street Fighter Zero. Amazing game. The original Diablo, which is really cool. I don't think I've actually ever come across this game on my hunts. Don't think it was too terribly popular at the time. I don't know. Here we have a Gatchaman. It says The Shooting. This is part of that like simple 1500 series or whatever it was called. None of those games are particularly good, so I pass on that. We got some Kamen Rider. We got some other things here. This is where I start to ramble, because when I'm looking at a bunch of just random PlayStation spines, I don't exactly know what everything is. I do know this, though. I'm very predictable, aren't I? Capcom, I always go back to it. Capcom Generation 5 with just different versions of Street Fighter 2 on it. Kind of an obsolete thing. Well, not kind of. Gun Bullets and Gun Barrel. Okay, I don't think that's how you spell barrel, people. But yeah, Gun Bullet, I believe also Point Blank. We actually ran across it in an arcade recently. It was pretty cool. Some Kid Stations, some Phantom Menace. I've actually never played that game. The amount of Star Wars games I've actually ever played, I can count on both hands. Silent Hill, just the manual though. I don't know why the hell that's there. I think you would want to set that aside. You tricked me. 500 yen for this Tekken 3. Common game, but wow, it looks really good. Nice condition, spine card and all. I do like to see that. I love to see a good jewel case with a nice Obi on it. Obi being the spine card. We got more. We got Dragon Quest. We got a bunch of Dragon Quest. We got a bunch of Final Fantasies. We got more Final Fantasies than you can shake a stick at. That's pretty common in a hard off these days, though. Biohazard 2, 500 yen. And 800 yen for the original Biohazard with a spine card, so that's nice. And I love the cover on it. 800 for Parasite Eve, which I was replaying again recently. That game is still awesome. Last Escape, aka Nemesis. That's also only like 800 yen. It's like $5. A lot of $5 games. Not too shabby. And then way down here on this rack, Hokuto no Ken. Great game on the PlayStation. It's essentially a 3D beat 'em up. And it's pretty cool. This is when Fist of the North Star games actually started to become playable, because all the 8 and 16-bit games sucked. Rockman Dash 2 for 2,000 yen, aka Mega Man Legends 2. I enjoyed that whole series. I even liked the Tron Bond game. I thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, that's a whole bunch of PlayStation and PlayStation 2 games. But let's not stand on ceremony. Let's look at my finds of the day, starting with that copy of Darius Gaiden, $29.70 after tax. Good price on that. What else you get, Jim? We got this copy of Turtles in Time for 2,700 yen. A little grody on the back, but it's at least, this is like 1,000 yen less than I usually see it for. We got Ganbare Goemon 4, 1,800 yen. Great game, and it's in great condition too. Very happy with that. We got a copy of Tetris Battle Gaiden, 1,500 yen. I take that every time. All day, every day. Great game. Now we got that copy of King of Fighters 96 for 3,000 yen. And it's complete, so it's got the RAM cartridge. Or is it a ROM cartridge? But it's got everything. And that copy of Makaimura for 3,600 yen. And it's like practically in like perfect shape. Shocking. I was so happy to find this today. And then here is the entire basket. As you can see, I went back through all those loose carts for the Super Famicom and Famicom. Found a whole bunch of games. We got 1942, we got Hokuto no Ken, we got Macross, we got some more Gundam, we got some Game Boy games. We got all kinds of good stuff. And we're checking out. And the price tag on this stuff wasn't too bad, all things considered. So I left this hard off with a nice big bag of games for a variety of consoles. And I did okay today. I didn't exactly clean up. But I didn't spend more than I wanted to, we'll say that. So let me know down in the comments. You see anything in this video you like today? And what do you think is my best find of the day? I'd like to know. And until next time, thanks for watching, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.